Sonic Adventure 2. You know I had to do the follow-up. Sonic Adventure 2 was actually the game I played first way back in the day, and the Chow Garden kept me playing well beyond the story's completion. I never 100%ed the game, never got to go to Green Hill Zone, but I got pretty close, I would say. I can't remember the exact amount of emblems I collected, but I was definitely closer to the 150 range. The reason I collected so many emblems in the first place is because the Chow Garden's black market said rarer items appear when you have more emblems. Kid me was hyper fixated on raising my Chow to be the best he could be. I can't remember my main Chow's name, but I do remember he was a neutral Sonic Chow. Those were good times. Enough with my brief background on the game though. Let's talk about porting. Sonic Adventure 2 is much better off compared to Sonic Adventure 1 when it comes to porting. If you own the version on Steam, it comes packaged with an ancient setup launcher that really doesn't do it any favors for its first impression. Thankfully, we can circumvent it with the same mod loader I used for Sonic Adventure 1. Graphics are once again mucked up with this port, being much darker overall than the original. I think one of the characters that suffers from this the most is Tails, because his bright white and yellow fur gets incredibly dulled out in the port. Naturally, I once again modded up this playthrough in order to streamline and improve the experience with as many quality of life mods that I felt like I needed. For clarity's sake, I'm going to show off my mod list and talk about a change I made to the gameplay that does fundamentally shift how I experienced this game again. Knuckles and Rouge's Emerald Radars notoriously have this issue of only showing one emerald at a time in Sonic Adventure 2. You go left to right, and even if you're inches from an emerald piece, if it's not the current one you're tracking, you won't even hear a single blip. To be frank, the way they reworked the Emerald Radar system sucks. It's a huge downgrade in functionality, and that's where my mods come in. If you ever plan to revisit Sonic Adventure 2, you need this mod as well as some others. There are other YouTube videos on the platform, including this one I personally used that I will link to in the description of the video from BlazeHedgehog. He helped out a ton with getting the game running nice and smooth with all the bells and whistles of quality of life, and his extensive attention to detail has everything covered. Everything covered for me anyway. I focused predominantly on quality of life and bug fixes, trying to fix all of the things the port breaks. Now that you've got an idea of the mods I was going for, let's see my mod list. First of all, Better Radar returns the functionality to SA1's treasure hunting radar, and has options to alter the gameplay even further. I personally had the blue and pink color indicators enabled, but kept the other two unchecked. Spatial sound could be nice if you're someone who particularly struggled with the emerald hunting in the past, but I decided to go without it. Here is the rest of my list. There is a conflict between SA2 render fix and cutscene revamp, but I'll show you how I personally fixed it. I simply disabled the Force 4:3 aspect ratio here. Cutscene Revamp changes up the cutscenes to better support 16:9, and it created a more consistent viewing experience for me. Some cutscenes are still 4:3, but I'll take what we can get. I'll quickly skim over the rest here. Hedge Panel tweaks the game to make little quirks of the controls less obtuse. Character Select Plus lets me play as any character in any stage, and Smooth Wall Coals makes it so running against walls doesn't destroy my speed. SA2 volume controls should be clear by the name, I'd hope. By the way, if you need any help modding your own game, I'd highly suggest watching BlazeHedgehog yet again. Seriously, his video is excellent. Go give him a like for his thorough guide if it helps you. Now, onto actually playing Sonic Adventure 2. Instead of selecting an individual character to play as, we instead get a choice between a hero and dark side story. Both stories show two sides to the full narrative, and while we have the choice to play either, I think you know what most of us chose as kids to play first. In terms of analysis, however, I want to compare both starts. You can either start your Sonic game playing as Sonic naturally, or play as Dr. Eggman in a mech with much slower, combo-focused gameplay. It's undeniable that Sonic City Escape is both the more enjoyable level and gameplay style. It really is no competition. In general, the hero story is superior gameplay-wise, but the dark story gives additional context and backstory that enhances the overall narrative a lot. Sonic and Friends mostly just do hero stuff, if that makes sense. Dark Story, narratively, is much more unique, getting to do things in service of evil instead of undoing evil, and together, they create a plenty fun, contrasting yet similar experience. It's also just fun to get to be a villain for once. Games don't really allow you to do that all that often, so this is a novel experience, especially with how this game is 2 decades old now. How often were games back in the day allowing you to be the villain like this, especially so extensively? Both Hero and Dark Story contain nigh identical gameplay styles, those being the mech stages as Tails and Eggman, the treasure hunting as Knuckles and Rouge, and what is Sonic and Shadow's gameplay style called? Speed stages? Oh, duh. Don't know why that took a whole moment to realize. Sonic and Shadow's stages are high-speed platforming, which is to be expected. Tails and Eggman's mech stages are much slower paced, and their clunky mechs have issues taking turns quickly, so speed really isn't their main goal for a high grade. Instead, you can hold down the fire button for a time to lock onto multiple opponents at once. The more you lock onto before firing, the more points you get with your combo. Simple enough, but if you hold the button for too long, you will cancel all of your shots, so it becomes a game of aiming at as many enemies as you can in a short period of time. Getting hit by enemies also cancels your lock-on, so it can get quite hectic when enemies are shooting at you and you see your laser start going blue before it times out, but you want to squeeze in just one more enemy into your combo. Getting combos and a high score isn't a requirement though. Unlike Gamma in Sonic Adventure 1's gameplay, there is no time limit on these stages. His gameplay was a requirement to engage with, while Tails and Eggman's is optional. If you play these stages without attempting to get a high score, they become miserable slogs in my opinion. Naturally, choosing not to engage with the game in the way they intend for you to makes any game experience worse, but it's very easy to opt out. Here's where I believe the huge main problem with these stages comes in. Beyond the platforming being non-existent and the controls kind of being doo-doo stinky, losing a life and respawning at checkpoints destroys any chance you have at getting a high grade that run through. On a first playthrough, it's very unlikely you'll want to restart the entire level to get a good run. If you know your score is already tanked, are you really going to want to put in any more effort for the rest of the level? These stages are not particularly challenging if you aren't aiming to get huge combos, so they can easily venture into the realm of going from point A to point B if you lose investment in getting a high score. If chasing a high score is all the stages provide fun-wise, the reduced movement of Tails and Eggman make them less fun to play than Sonic and Shadow. You know, it's not like Sonic and Shadow can't earn a ton of points too, while also having more fun moment-to-moment movement. That's what I feel is the big, fundamental flaw with their gameplay. These stages go on for a long time too, especially the later in the game they get, so frustration can easily become associated with this gameplay style. You either engage with the challenge or don't, perhaps from being directly discouraged by the game, and then dread every mech stage going forward. I don't blame anyone for not liking them, but I personally don't mind them too much. They're a mid-experience for me. I'm willing to play them on a playthrough of the game, or replay if I need an A rank, but I never return to them for the fun of it like I do with Sonic and Shadow stages. Since we're touching on gameplay styles that can easily be associated with frustration, let's talk about the treasure hunting stages, shall we? I already mentioned how the Emerald Radar got downgraded significantly, which probably upset Adventure 1 fans coming to this game, but there's so much more to it than that. Knuckles and Rouge's stages get incredibly lengthy if you struggle to find the emerald pieces, and you will struggle to find at least one piece in every playthrough. The pieces spawn randomly around the maps, which does keep every playthrough fresh, but some of the spots are not created equally. Some emerald pieces are right out in the open, maybe even circling an object you can't help but miss while naturally going through the level. Some of them, however, are in a random spot with easily missable signposting. It's unlikely to happen in the earlier levels, but the later ones, they get massive, and it's all but guaranteed one of these levels will start to get on your nerves at some point. It's a huge shame Knuckles' playstyle from Sonic Adventure 1 didn't get the love it deserved. These hint monitors actually deduct points from you, albeit not too many. I've frequently heard that it's a beginner trap to not use any of the hint monitors at all, but when you see that they remove points from your overall score, you're disincentivized from using them if you want to get a high score. I don't think this is the player's fault for coming to that conclusion. When you check one, they give a description of what to look for. Tikal helped significantly more by giving you a general direction to go in, and the hint monitors don't even come close to comparing with the quality of hints. If you haven't seen what they're talking about, you go back to aimlessly wandering until you find something that fits the bill. Following Tikal was a superior system, as each hint from her narrowed down the general area to be looking so much more and was naturally more intuitive. Tikal immediately gave direction, and it just helped with the flow of stages a lot. SA1's emerald hunting stages were also significantly easier than the ones in SA2, but I don't want to get too into it right now. Regardless, I alleviated so much of this headache by downloading the mod for SA1 style emerald detection. Most of the treasure hunting levels were fun on my playthrough because of it. In fact, full disclosure, I had to play through the entire game twice because my footage for the first playthrough was of this quality. Poo-poo stinky, as you can tell. Yeah, let's just say I was not happy when I saw this after checking the footage. However, getting more experience with the game really highlighted its strengths and weaknesses to me, and it really showed just how much better the treasure hunting gameplay could be with the correct tweaks. I plan to go level by level, story scene by story scene, analyzing things as I notice them. So I will go further in depth with the frustration of the mech levels and the treasure hunting stages as they come. Let's give Sonic and Shadow stages their own gameplay overview since I've talked about the other two gameplay styles. Compared to Sonic Adventure 1, the two hedgehogs control a whole lot tighter. Sonic and Shadow do not have the overpowered spin dash from 1, so their average speed is plenty slower. Continuing with the comparisons, their levels have actually shrunk down in scope to more of a focused series of hallways. If I had to put it in simple terms, I'd say these levels are closer to classic Sonic level design. There's one way to go forward more often than not, and even when there is more than one way, they don't diverge as far apart. It's very upper path, lower path design. The camera more often remains behind Sonic and Shadow while running around, but still has many cinematic shots to feast our eyes upon. You can really tell how much more narrow the path is when playing both in such a short time apart like I have. This all feels like a refinement of scope rather than a downgrade, thankfully. They're taking the parts that worked well from Sonic Adventure 1 and built upon them while cutting the fat. And while I miss elements of Sonic Adventure 1, such as the exploration areas, I enjoy this too. The two games are two similar brands of fun without being the exact same, and I enjoy both for the uniquely different experiences they provide. That's my gameplay overview for now. Let's dig our teeth into the meat of the game by starting off on the hero side. But first, I am obliged to interrupt the video. Would you please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video? Leaving a like or a comment after you've completed it would also be huge to me. Doing these things lets me know how I'm doing as a creator, but also helps my channel on YouTube grow. Okay, now we can get to experiencing the hero story. The game opens on a helicopter flying overhead. Sigma Alpha, huh? Oh, how the times changing makes something innocuous before take on a completely different meaning. The side of this helicopter in question reads gun, and they talk about having a hedgehog on board. I can't help but notice how this intro parallels Sonic Adventure 1. Sonic comes to the aid of the police originally to stop chaos, but now the opposite is happening. Sonic is a prisoner in police custody. This flips the status quo on its head while using the same elements of SA1's intro, and partially serves to justify the lack of casual-paced exploration. Sonic's a criminal on the run as he busts out of the helicopter, and he lets his captors know what he thinks of the ride service. From there, he dives down to the city streets below atop a makeshift board he took off the helicopter, and he flashes us a confident grin on the way down. Looking like a helicopter yourself, Sonic. Yeah! This intro characterizes Sonic perfectly as a cool, carefree dude with style. A wonderfully brief summary of his character for anyone new coming to this game. The gameplay then integrates flawlessly with the previous cutscene, starting us mid-air dropping down to the street below. The music's beat starts just as board meets pavement, and one of the best songs in the series starts up. I hardly need to tell you this is an excellent, powerful opening to the game. It sells the fantasy of playing as Sonic to us right from its opening minute, and the developers don't bother putting on the brakes. We get right to sliding down the city streets, weaving between roads and cars before even a single tutorial pop up. Why is this such an excellent moment? Well, you move the players automatically forward before they know any of the controls, letting them get completely absorbed in that feeling of raw speed. It's unimpeded and low stakes, but it certainly doesn't feel that way. The lady on the radio reinforces that the police are in hot pursuit of Sonic, which acts as your encouragement to turn left and right down these busy roads as fast as you can. This moment is pure badassery right off the bat, and we don't even realize they've added a silent tutorial beneath it. Don't worry about going forward or jumping. Just move left and right to reach your current goal of getting down these streets. The only other button the game prompts you to hit is braking in the upper right, but ignoring it doesn't affect your ability to proceed all that much. Inevitably, everyone will get through this segment no matter their skill level, but even high skill players aren't left bored with this silent tutorial. See these trick panels? Hitting the jump button on them allows you to perform tricks in the air, which rewards you with points. There's also goodies up in the air at different elevations, meaning even a less than perfect jump is still rewarded with something. Speed is the defining factor for how high up you fly, so replays of this level involve trying to go faster and attempting to hit those trick ramps just right. This first area gets to serve as a tutorial, while also acting as a stellar, exhilarating intro to City Escape and Sonic Adventure 2 as a whole. It's hard not to get excited seeing the rows of cars you often send tumbling down the hill alongside you. Let's just ignore the implications of the property damage Sonic has caused. If he wasn't a criminal before, he definitely is now. Sega deserves tons of praise for this genius implementation of a safe tutorial that isn't hand-holding menus with way too much text. I've played plenty of games that are heavy-handed with their tutorialization, and while it works, in my opinion, it's not the best way to go about it. When it came to school, what did you enjoy doing more? Reading the textbooks or watching an episode of the Magical School Bus about the subject at hand? Everyone chose the latter, right? Anyone who chose the former is lying. Education works best when it is also entertaining, so making a fun tutorial just makes sense to do in a game. Moving forward, upon reaching the end of the skateboard section, we get deposited into this perfectly safe area where people can come to a better understanding of the controls. Omochao is ahead if you need additional help, as well as some wooden boxes and a tire. Your exploration gets rewarded by a small pipe beneath the wooden boxes which houses an animal. We collect them the same as Sonic Adventure 1, and their existence as a pickup tells any returning fan that the Chow are back too. Actually, hold up. I played back through this as Amy, which you may or may not have already seen me playing as up until this point, and Omochao right here is completely useless. What he expresses could also be told by simply having a tutorial, you know, like saying A to jump. Sonic isn't too complicated to control in the first place, but after seeing that one Cuphead clip from that one game journalist, I think having the option available for very thorough tutorials is still important. I don't want to exclude other people from playing games just because I'm good at them and don't need the help. However, forced, heavy-handed tutorials that you cannot avoid are a big gripe of mine, because while not excluding me necessarily, does bore myself and any other player that already knows what's what. But this, Omochao, you've earned your reputation. Anyways, we come across our first enemy here, this gun robot. They're not difficult at all to dispatch, and their fire rate is too slow to be all that threatening isolated like this. When gun robots are defeated, they drop these things called chaos drives, which get banked in the same spot as animals. We can talk more about them later. If we continued right, we would come across another box, metal instead of wood. You cannot break this box in a first playthrough, but on replays, you can break it to access a switch with a trail of rings to follow. If you go left and keep up the pace, you can actually run along the wall. Wall running in this game feels slightly better, but in both games, it's difficult to move exactly as you would like on the walls. Sadly, it's still finicky to get the hang of, and I've never been able to become confident with my wall running abilities in these games. My favorite thing that remains in these games is the ability to jump off of slopes at high speeds to get a higher jump than normal. Despite the boost formula games being infinitely faster feeling, they nerf your jump height in a way that has always felt unnatural. When playing Shadow Generations through, if you jump while boosting, you basically lose all speed. Sure, there is an exploit with the Chaos Spear that allows you to keep your momentum, but it's unintended. If you genuinely enjoyed doing this tech, I'd be willing to bet that you're a fan of the adventure era. Destroying these boxes leads to a staircase with a rail, and they're basically begging you to jump onto it. They're right in the middle and stand out with their bright orange against the plain concrete. Rails are something Sonic Adventure 2 uses a lot, and while they're safe to use here, later on, they're the only path forward above death pits aplenty. It becomes quite exhilarating to use them, especially with all the risk that's involved. I'll talk more about rails later as they become more relevant, but in this level, they're mainly for points and feeling cool. The dash panel will always send you up this skateboard ramp, and I throw this tire for good luck or something. It's odd how these objects to pick up are just around the level, but they're a harmless inclusion. You are offered a choice here between taking the stairs or taking a risk for the ring box. You probably have learned about the homing attack at this point, and if you don't react fast enough, you'll likely fall into the pillars below. There is a death plane if you mess up really bad, but as this is optional, anyone struggling or not confident can simply go up the stairs. We are shot forward after going through this entryway by boosters, which puts us in a similar downhill path as the intro. We have freedom of movement now, acting as a gradual step towards acclimating us to higher speeds we're in more control of, and we get directed towards a trick panel. By now, curiosity should have been piqued, and hitting jump on these also let you go for tricks. They test your reflexes next, directing you to another set of dash panels right afterwards into another trick ramp. If you can hit 2 in a row, you'll grab yourself a magnetic shield and plenty of rings for being stylish. City Escape is constantly rewarding us for great gameplay and offering challenges for mastery all throughout. It's a masterclass in first levels. Even the way it directs us down straight roads to force our speed up, then has clearly indicated sharp turns to push us towards being comfortable with speed, is genius. It's encouraging the playstyle that's most fun every step of the way, but it's so understated that you barely notice it. They push us further towards entering that Sonic game flow state with more rail grinding, sending us through these twists and turns as fast as they can. Normally, you would have to put effort in to maintain your balance on the rails to go fast, but the ports of Sonic Adventure 2 completely butcher the sensitivity on rails that was present in the Dreamcast original. The mod I have installed changes rail grinding to be closer to the modern games, where you just zoom, and it's great. The game doesn't explain rail grinding particularly well to begin with, so most people never get a full grasp on the system that's broken anyway. It's a huge shame overall, because rail grinding has become way too automated over the years. And in Sonic Adventure 2, they really had this system of mastery that still kept rail grinding risky. Also, I've come to realize that they like to throw 3 rails in boost formula games just to not have to make any sort of level design for you to go on. It's easier to just throw a couple rails in there to fill out the level more and pad the runtime. Not in Sonic Adventure 2 though. Most fast gamers get sent up top, where there happens to be a golden gun robot. These robots are on every stage, but are often hidden and appear only briefly before poofing off to Narnia. Destroying them nets you 1,000 points, and they're key to securing A ranks in many levels. We've also got ourselves a blue box with a Chow head on it. Destroying it nets us a key, and there are 3 of these on each stage. The first one broken will always give you a key to the Chow Garden, sending you there after the stage ends. The second nets us a whole bunch of animals to bring back to said Chow Garden, and the third gives us a rare animal. On this stage, it's a unicorn. Here's another spot where this bunny is just hopping around. One of the Omochow usually tell you about the amount of animals hidden on the stages, and picking them up is something I prioritize over Chaos Drives. They give more stats and Teacher Chow new abilities, whereas the drives just increase a single stat. To be fair though, Chaos Drives do not lower any stats, whereas animals will lower some stats while raising others. Another path downwards challenges us to hit these trick ramps on uneven terrain. Yet again, they're continuing to gradually ramp up the challenge as the level goes on. Sonic running down the wall is always cool. Oh, that's what I get for not just enjoying the fun camera angle. The springs at the bottom throw us forward onto a pole we start swinging off. You need to time your button press to flip off onto the next one, and our reward for success is an invincibility capsule and another Chow box. I end up missing it and falling down to the lower path, but I take this opportunity to show off the return of power-ups. There are secret power-ups within stages that require other ones to get like this one, and while most are useful, the magic gloves are just a novelty upgrade. Upgrades like this serve to lock off some of our moveset for simplicity's sake on Sonic and Shadow, while others are rewards for exploration. The only issue I take is old power-ups needing to be re-gotten in SA2 that we had in SA1. No one likes re-getting the same stuff they had before, unless it's changed somehow. It serves no narrative purpose either, but this is a minor nitpick at best. I don't really care 20 years after this game's release that some abilities are repeats from another 20-plus-year-old game. The next staircase we head down has gaps in the railing, challenging us to jump between them to keep the speed up. It can be finicky to land on some rails, and I do think it veers on being a smidge too precise. At least the people in this city are on top of their cardio, because imagine taking these steps to work every day. The iconic gun truck chase is next. The way the truck flies up into the air and causes the screen to vibrate when it lands sells its weight and danger, and the main challenge presented here is moving against the camera. It's not difficult, but as a potentially brand new fan to the Sonic series, this could be challenging. If you've ever played around in this sequence, you know the truck adjusted speed dependent on yours and isn't all that much of a threat, but it feels that way to someone who's never experienced it before. They think they're going to be ran over if they're not going as fast as they can. There are also ramps and rings along your path down, and both are something only the highest skilled players will be able to hit consistently. I'm still unable to remember exactly when to hit the trick ramps myself. It's like the ultimate test of your abilities that have been built up over the level, and it's a nigh flawless climax. The property damage of Gun's truck comes off as reckless, almost deranged, and subtly characterizes the police as not so simple good guys if you think about it. Okay, maybe not subtle. We're already doubting them considering they tried to capture Sonic, but this sequence solidifies that distrust. There's a secret animal by these mailboxes we can get via whistling, and we hit the goal ring right after. Sonic Adventure 2 actually grades your performance with a letter grade at the end of levels, from E to A. This is an innocent enough system that gives you a general idea of how you did, but to completionists, it's hell. In order to 100% the game requires you to A rank every single level, and each level also has 4 additional versions to play and master. What's even worse about getting A ranks? If you lose a life on the level, your score gets tanked, and it becomes almost impossible to A rank, as I mentioned before, for the mech stages. Going for all A ranks completely changes the dynamic of your relationship with this game, and it's something I've never went for personally. I think it would be something fun to do on a stream one day, but not right now. After successfully completing the level with a Chao key in hand, you're sent to the Chao lobby. Sonic Adventure 2 structures itself with this optional intermission, and it's handled much better than in the first game. Due to everything being on the exploration fields, after every level, you would need to navigate to one of 3 entrances to the Chao Garden in order to head there. If you were caught up in the current story in SA1, you could easily forget about the Chao amidst all the chaotic events of the game. In my opinion, this is a much superior system. If you care enough to go for the Chao boxes, and you can get sent here in between levels and chill out. Normally, when you enter the Chao Garden for the first time, you'll have 2 Chao eggs waiting for you. As this is a necessary second playthrough, my Chao are already partially raised an entire playthrough's worth. I had planned to raise one Chao solely on the hero side, and the other on the dark side, but unless you wanted your video to look like this, then the replay was necessary. Could have done it on another save, but I grew attached to my Chao. Simple as that. I have an option toggled in my mod loader that multiplies all stats given to Chao, because the grind normally is unfeasible for adults with limited free time to really indulge in. Just like in Sonic Adventure 1, I don't extensively interact with the Chao Garden, nor do I plan to cover it here at length, but I do want to mention what was changed. The other 2 gardens are locked until you get an adult hero and dark Chao respectively, and there is also a Chao school where you can put your Chao into daycare, evaluate their health and stats, name them, and also the returning black market. I am opting to save all of this Chao related business in depth for a potential separate video down the line, because any veteran Chao Garden enjoyer knows the depth of the complexity present in all the Chao systems. As an example, trying to get a Chao to look just the way you'd like involves careful planning, and I'm not going to get into it extensively. Let me know if you want to see me cover both games' Chao Gardens after this, because I've been considering it. These videos get long enough as is, so it deserves its own time separately to be reviewed. I'll still pop in here to show you how the Chao are growing while I discuss other topics between levels though. For now, we're moving on to what comes next. It's now nighttime, and we face off against our first boss of the game. Sonic seems unfazed, goading his opponent on in that typical Sonic fashion. I happen to notice that Chaos is on a billboard conveniently in the background, and this had to be an intentional choice. Our first boss is Bigfoot. He oddly mentions an intruder despite them being the ones pursuing Sonic, but this makes me think it has to be reused dialogue from Shadow's side. You're not slick, developers. The boss hovers up above the ground, being unreachable by your normal jump height. If you take advantage of the wood boxes located around the arena, you can slip in some hits before Bigfoot comes down to attack Sonic. If you aren't quick though, the boss's attacks will destroy the boxes as he flies around the arena. The boss lands to shoot the slowest moving missiles I have ever seen, and I nearly lose my gaming license by playing my childhood game so badly. With the bounce bracelet, you can also get enough height to defeat the boss real quick, but as this is a power-up Sonic gets later, this is only available on repeat playthroughs. You do not receive a letter grade for fighting bosses, which I thought important to note. Overall, Bigfoot is a very simple boss with a sprinkling of depth involving hitting him faster. If it sounds like I don't have much to say, it's because I don't. The first boss should be simple and easy to fight, and I appreciate that using your surroundings allows you to take down Bigfoot faster if you know what you're doing. It'd grow frustrating fast if we had to wait for him to give us our turn to hit him, and so many other games fall prey to bosses that drag on and on. A perfectly competent first boss all in all. An iconic cutscene follows after the boss fight, with it being Shadow's introduction to the cast.
It all starts with this. A jewel containing the ultimate power.
Besides the delivery being super whack, Shadow starts off with a mysterious monologue like any good villain does. Sonic thinks fast, concluding that his random arrest was due to Shadow looking similar to him.
You! So, where do you think you're going with that emerald? Say something, you fake hedgehog!
Hold on, pause.
Control!
I know this is very far-fetched to grasp when looking at the two of them side by side, but with Shadow's beta design, Terios, looking much more similar to Sonic, and maybe, and I mean just maybe, the military using Sonic as a corrupt sort of cover-up story, this could make sense. They could easily fix this in a potential remake by having the only footage of Shadow stealing the Chaos Emerald be of poor quality, or have him running through shadows. Shadow and shadows. Then it might make a small bit of sense. Maybe Eggman could get crafty and make false footage of Sonic stealing the Emerald too? Plenty of options for keeping this plot point the same. Let's continue. Damn, Sonic really calls him a fake here. As if Shadow's identity issues aren't already severe enough, Sonic came in swinging, albeit justifiably so. Then, Shadow makes his move, using a brand new power with the Chaos Emerald he has in his possession. This defines Shadow as even more mysterious and also powerful, putting Sonic on the back foot when it comes to speed.
He's fast! Hey, it's not his speed, he must be using the Chaos Emerald to warp.
Sure, Sonic follows up with saying he's essentially cheating, but it does create realistic stakes that this new threat can compete with Sonic easily. Shadow properly introduces himself as the ultimate life form, which is definitely something I'd expect to come out of a villain's mouth. Their brief introduction ends in another flash of light, with Sonic being apprehended by the police who narrowly missed the actual culprit. They really showed up 1 second too late. Overall, this scene is another excellent introduction to the game's brand new main antagonist, a darker reflection of Sonic. The whole story is set up this way, even down to the near identical gameplay styles in both stories and characters visiting similar locales in their levels. Rival characters always have at least one thing in common with the main character, but go down a different path either slightly or majorly depending on the story. Lots of flexibility there. Shadow here is basically everything Sonic is not personality-wise, but they're two sides of the same coin of cool and fast. Newcomers and old fans alike certainly had their curiosity peaked all those years ago because this setup is done so well. We immediately jump over to a scene involving Knuckles and another brand new character, Rouge the Bat, on opposite sides of a very tiny Master Emerald. It's implied they've been in some sort of scuffle beforehand. They bicker back and forth, with Knuckles expositing some about how the Master Emerald can neutralize the energy of the Chaos Emeralds.
The Master Emerald contains special powers that neutralize the energy of the Chaos Emeralds.
While both of them are apparently bickering so intensely, Eggman sneaks in with a claw arm to snatch the Master Emerald away. Pause. Why is Knuckles out here in these ruins with the Master Emerald? Why is it away from its shrine? Has Knuckles been fleeing with it from Batgirl here? Is there any media out there that explains exactly why this scene happens the way it does? Am I asking a million questions like I was in Sonic Adventure 1? Yes.
What the? Look who's calling who a thief.
Even when Knuckles is getting his whole life's purpose stolen from him, he still has to beef with Rouge some before hopping into action. I find it odd Eggman doesn't seem to recognize the Master Emerald, but it is looking a little bit different, so I guess I can't blame him. Rouge saying, "So that's Dr. Eggman," implies she already knows of him and is now putting a face to a name. Smart writing considering she's a government agent who's already informed on the situation. Just a little breadcrumb-sized hint to start off the game with. It's funny Eggman was going to just take the emerald like it's a happy accident. The way Knuckles literally flies up is so janky. It honestly makes me laugh every time I see it. He weaponizes what he learned from Sonic Adventure 1, and this causes Rouge to completely freak out. What is this voice acting?
What was that all about?
Damn, Rouge got some hands. Look at Knuckles after he's shaken by her. Gosh, I love their back and forth beefing.
We'll see about that, Batgirl.
Knuckles says Batgirl like it's a damn slur. Better watch out, Batgirl. No, this is Patrick. See? The mod is immediately at work. The middle emerald piece is close, but I wouldn't have known that until I got the first one normally. This mod makes such a huge difference that I would suggest any player, new or old alike, to download this mod at minimum on a replay. As you can see, I find the middle emerald piece first and nail myself a perfect. The faster you find the pieces, the better your score will be. Only matters for A ranks, but if you are going for A ranks, the largest problem with treasure hunting stages arise. These hint boxes affect your score negatively. If you're frustrated and unable to find a piece, using them essentially has a penalty associated with them, so it makes some people avoid using them. I do get what they were going for here, but I've already explained that these hints aren't as great as Takal's guidance was in 1 anyways, due to them being text rather than a general direction. To talk more about Wild Canyon itself, the middle of the level being a gust of wind helps clue players in that Knuckles levels have an emphasis on verticality over horizontal traversal. Also, if this is your first time playing as Knuckles, it's an easy way to get you up in the air to test out gliding in a low stakes environment. It's a fun opener that doesn't take too long to complete, and both the music and environment are just plain fun. I miss each character having their own style of music playing in their stages, because Knuckles, Rouge, and Shadow's music have such strong personality present. Yeah, the music that plays is a bit cheesy and on the nose, but it still sounds good. Sonic is known for more hits than misses when it comes to music, and at this point, the Sonic brainworms are lodged so deep into my brain that I love it unironically. Emeralds can be in robots as well as out in the open. Did I mention that earlier? I can't recall. They can also be in these floating pieces of rock, which is a nifty hiding place. It really makes you think outside of the box to find them. If you notice some movements that look like struggles when gliding and climbing on walls, I was absolutely struggling. Some level geometry just hates Knuckles and Rouge, and the wrestling you have to do sometimes detracts from the overall experience. Gosh, I really wish they would give Knuckles gameplay another shot. No jank, no silly Emerald Radar limitations, and boom, you'd have a winning formula. I'm sure they could easily make a collectathon game in the style of Banjo-Kazooie with Knuckles here. Am I the only one that thinks Knuckles' emerald hunting gameplay has so much untapped potential? Seriously, I've only ever heard indifference or disappointment in the formula. Question, do people consider me getting A ranks on the treasure hunting stages as cheating due to the mod? Second question, does anyone care? I can tell you the later levels are still a massive pain in the keister. I'm completely okay with using Chao stat multipliers too, because little bear me used to do the exploit where you could reuse an animal or drive over and over again regardless. This mod preserves the gameplay flow while also allowing me decent stat gain. A win-win. After that, we get to see what Tails is up to now, and he's flying his plane just like the beginning of Sonic Adventure 1. You know what I realized about him crashing only after the fact? In all likelihood, his emerald power source acted up due to Froggy being present at Emerald Coast. He was possessed by Chaos's water, so he likely had something to do with the malfunction.
It's a secret military base that is reinforced and super strong.
Did you know the previous Tails voice actor from Sonic Adventure 1 got too old for this role? Sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? Guess what? They got the little brother of SA1's VA to do Tails' voice acting here. Another fun fact, after Sonic Heroes, Tails is only voiced by adult women going forward, and it's for the best, because expecting great delivery from a child is a tall ask. Also, you know, there's the slippery slope of child labor going on there. Beyond that, Tails is a real friend. He trusts in Sonic's character over what he saw on satellite TV and goes to break him out. That's some deep trust. You're a real one, Tails. Amy's also a real one. Wow. Tails shows off his newest tornado transformation in defense of Amy, and we're in our very first character 1v1. Remember these from the first game? They are only marginally improved and still aren't very challenging, unfortunately. In this fight, Eggman just runs towards you and shoots at you, so spamming your fire button is enough to beat him. If you don't know how to operate the mech gameplay style, since there's no tutorial before this, you're guaranteed to get through eventually if you just hit enough buttons. I suppose its simplicity justifies it not explaining itself here, but compared to how Sonic's City Escape is near flawless and Wild Canyon is great, this is a bad introduction. We're now well past the intro of the game at this point, so there's no need to try and instantly hook our attention the same way Sonic's level does. We're invested at this point, so they can take the time to explain the new gameplay style, or at least put us in an area where we can feel out the controls before combat. It's not very good in a game design sense, and this also surely contributes to the overall way mech stages are viewed. Eggman canonically loses here, even if, when playing the Dark Side story, you do this fight again from the side of Eggman fighting Tails. Oh boy, I have some things to say about the structure of the Dark Side story. The fact Sonic has not one, but two people willing to bail him out of literal jail is so sweet. Tails and Amy really are his ride or die. I appreciate Amy's inclusion in this plot, but the fact they give her nothing to do all throughout is really meh. It's a running gag that everyone leaves her behind, but I never particularly found it funny. I don't have an issue with the gag, mind you, but it is a sad downgrade for her after being playable in the last game. Prison Lane opens with 3 bots in our way, and a closed gate that we can aim our blaster through. In order to proceed, you need to successfully lock on to enemies here. In all likelihood, if you don't know how to lock on, you probably don't know how to jump and shoot at an angle to shoot the robot behind the gate. So this all but guarantees you know what you need to do going forward. It's less lengthy than Sonic's tutorial, but it doesn't have to be long. Tails' gameplay involves very little platforming and is forgiving on that front for the most part. If we pay attention to the level design in these levels, they're often the least complex. Sure, we've got a cool camera trick here that messes with the perspective, but getting from place to place becomes next to no issue once you get the hover power up. Sometimes, the most difficult part will be fighting the camera. I'm sure this would have been fine if I turned auto camera off, but it can really start to wrestle with you if you happen to do something the game doesn't like. Due to the aiming being based on which direction you're facing, jumping and spinning around wildly is often the way I build up my combos. I also just really enjoy jumping and spamming the hover. I can't help it if a little stimming just fires the neurons, okay? I don't have too much overall to say about this level. It's a competent level, but very average. I feel like the level design here is more repetitive than other stages, and it doesn't help the level geometry is very boxish. It serves the narrative of this being a prison, feeling very boxed in of course, and so does the repeating gates you need to open, but it would be in bad faith for me to say this level is anything other than average. It's definitely not as good as City Escape as an opener to this gameplay style, and Knuckles' first stage is just great fun. To be clear though, I don't dislike it, I just don't have a strong like or dislike, and that's what I want to articulate. It is fine, and that's okay. I barely notice the difference this power-up provides us beyond color. I do like the new color of the missiles though. I don't mean to sound so harsh when it comes to the gameplay of mech stages, because I genuinely don't mind them, but I am attempting to be objective that their gameplay is rather flawed and not as well thought out as the other two. At least, I think so. I do believe there is a way to make this gameplay style fun too, but it would involve combining Sonic's moveset with the blaster combo gameplay in my mind. Why is she? Is that what they originally said in Japanese or something? Eggman also says Yosh in here when interacting with the Chow, so I guess it's a weird quirk. Doesn't matter, but my friends who were watching me definitely commented on it. Just another Sonic-ism of Sonic games. Oh, Amy is freeing Sonic? I guess Tails was clearing the way for Amy then. I like the back and forth the two of them have here. Amy gets crazy in Heroes with how obsessive she acts, but here, it feels like a playful back and forth that they're both aware of.
The reason I'm in here is because of that fake hedgehog.
You mean that black hedgehog?
Did you see it?
Oh, Amy. First robot friend, now this?
It's all that writing on the wall anyway.
Amy has a point though. What is all that writing on the wall? What could it be? It's not possible to make out, but I'm pretty sure I know what this is hinting towards.
Sonic, he's such a brat sometimes.
Amy calling Sonic a brat just hits different. Since we play as him, we don't look at him in that light very often, but in her POV, it makes perfect sense to hear her say that. Sonic is bratty in how he doesn't even let her finish speaking before running off. Metal Harbor opens immediately on a loop. giving us a running start. I wonder, do all Sonic stages do this? I guess we'll see, won't we? Oh, that's embarrassing. I think I broke out laughing at such a stupid mistake, but I was attempting to get on the rail for points. This was still at a point where doing the homing attack was semi-difficult due to lack of visual feedback on where you're aiming. So doing this right here does actually take some effort. Now, normally you go up to the path on the left to get the light speed dash. I already have it, so we just continue on. The light speed dash is very self-explanatory. You follow a trail of rings by hitting the action button. They absolutely want to make sure you know how to use the light speed dash too. This level is the tutorial for it. There's often no other way forward, so it's trial by fire. Sure, it's a single button press, but sometimes a light speed dash doesn't work how you would expect it to. It's also mapped to the same button as the bounce, so you can fall into a pit very easily if mistimed. Being a bit careful minimizes these, but they really should have taken more advantage of some of the other buttons. A pro tip I read is, if you want to guarantee that you use the light speed dash, if you use a homing attack before going for a light speed dash, you can't bounce after a homing attack, so you're guaranteed to use a light speed dash. I just love how gun is plastered on everything as you zoom by. Can't mistake it for anyone else's, can we? Not too much longer, and we come across the iconic rocket that tops off this level. As a kid, I didn't even know about the upper path, or at least never saw a reason to pursue it. I go for it here, and yeah, my pace is definitely too slow to get it. I was close, but my movement isn't the best with the controller I currently have. It's inexpensive and old, so it has some dead spots on its analog stick. The jumping I attempted to do on the second go round was to avoid doing sharp turns at high speed. That didn't go well either. Ugh.
Take me, sweet dad!
What? I knew I wasn't going to make it. I concede to the challenge of the rocket and go to the lower path, and the silence that follows as you shoot up into the sky speaks for itself. We get to round off the level with a simple, short, and fun bit of boarding with goodies along the path. Metal Harbor is another great stage to follow City Escape, ramping up the challenge and expanding its expectations of us with homing attack chains along the main path. With the sea being all around, it's a perilous journey too, but not so threatening as to be inappropriate for a second level. The locale is unique because most of Eggman's bases tend to be up in the sky, and this is a military base on the sea. It lacks his personality, much more cold and basic like a government would have it. The name Metal Harbor sets the tone perfectly, and it's just a great stage. Sonic's 2 for 2 for levels. What a great second level. Wait, not the second level, but the second Sonic level. The fourth in the hero story. The more I think about it actually, switching between 3 perspectives for a single story over and over like this is sort of paced like something you would see on TV with an A plot, B plot, C plot. On a gameplay side though, how often does a game ask you to learn 3 different gameplay styles around the same time? It's definitely interesting. I can't really say whether I like the way Sonic Adventure 1 handles it more or not. I remember I was in a rush trying to get Chapon all leveled up before they went to sleep. Short little story time. As a kid, I had a Sonic Chow I raised that won me literally every challenge in the game. The only thing is, in my childlike impatience, I would wake the Chow up to give them power-ups immediately. You get where this is going. My Chow reached the second evolution, otherwise known as reincarnation. I think I went slack-jawed when I saw my Chow was gone afterwards. I remember that I could not accept it, so I reset my GameCube and attempted to fix it. However, little bear me didn't know that you could cheese it by repeatedly petting your Chow for long enough. I had attempted to feed, carry, and pet him, but I never did it enough to right my wrongs. At some point, after turning the normal garden into a sort of quarantine zone for my single dying Chow, I accepted that what I did was wrong and let my Chow pass on. Yes, the Chow Garden put me through the 5 stages of grief. Now I flinch and gasp whenever I accidentally even hit the Chow. I learned my lesson. Crazy that the media says video games teach us violence, but I learned that actions have consequences instead. I wasn't even that mean to my Chow, just ignorant and negligent of their rest, but I damaged our relationship through my actions. Wow. That got a little deep. I honestly want to hear others' stories with their own Chow. Did you go through anything similar to me? Share your Chow trauma in the comments, because I really want to read it. It couldn't have been just me who lost one of their Chow to ignorance, right? For the time being, let's move forward to our next story encounter. Another legendary scene is before us. Just listen to these two beef it up with one another.
That blue hedgehog again, of all places.
I found you, Faker.
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh? You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you eat those words.
Enough said. They mutually antagonize each other into a confrontation, and the battle is on. It's definitely a battle. Look at this AI. You can literally see the code computing in real time. He has to stop before jumping. These PvP fights are insanely bad from a gameplay standpoint, especially so if you take a moment to stop and observe them. This might be some Sonic fan copium on my part, but I honestly see them as charmingly bad. At the very least, they get to be funny and goofy instead of frustrating bad, and that makes them inoffensive to me.
I'm the coolest.
I'm the coolest. That's about the nerdiest thing I've ever heard Shadow say. Everyone knows if you have to say it, you're not, but he's the one exception. Shadow's as cool as ice. Shadow feet, that is all. I like how you can see a 1-up in the background because this isn't a cutscene in the traditional sense, but a sort of scene within the level itself. Check how these bugs buzz by on the first jump. The developers really had an eye for style, and details like these are something we can all appreciate. Green Forest has to be one of the more open-feeling levels. Let me explain what I mean. There are multiple paths available here, and with how sectioned off they are from one another, it really feels like you're in a new part of the level, rather than just a few platforms above the main path. What I'm describing is essentially a Knuckles part of the level in Sonic 3 and Knuckles in terms of difference. You know, sectioned off and its own thing rather than again, a few floating platforms. Does that make any sense? Well, if it doesn't, here's what to take away from that. Green Forest, good. Did you see that? That's an example of the Lightspeed Dash not working because I didn't approach it in the way the game intended. I know we give them flack for how automated their levels are, but look at how close I came to taking a dip. I near had a heart attack when it happened. By the way, the timer you see in the upper right corner, it's counting down, but there's more than enough time for the average player to reach the end of the level. It's not truly threatening you, but its existence creates an urgency alongside the music to make you rush. It gets its intended effect across without the frustration of an actual tight time limit, so maybe the smoke and mirrors is actually a good thing. These vines we swing on are an example of automation that acts as a cool, thematically and environmentally appropriate set piece that I really enjoy. If you've watched my other two videos on Sonic X Shadow Generations, which should be on screen now if you're interested, you know I talk about some of my issues with automation in the modern games. When it feels too overused, like the abundance of rails to send you place to place, it gets tiresome. I also just feel like Sonic Team's 2D levels are incredibly hit or miss, and automation in 2D feels way more unnecessary than in 3D. Yet, their 2D levels have abundant automation all throughout. What? Okay then. If you've played the games, this sometimes just happens. Try not to let it get to you. I'm no perfect hardcore gamer, that's for sure. I do miss these levels having uniquely themed enemies, like Eggman's monkey bots in jungles or tropical islands. I think it's a smart choice to lighten their load in terms of enemy design, doubly so in a still new 3D platformer space. To make it clear, I'm not complaining that there isn't enough enemy diversity overall, but 2D Sonic was just more diverse. This is still plenty acceptable. You can really start to see the more hallway-like design in this level. The whole level is built like Windy Valley's third act in Sonic Adventure. It's sometimes a realistic environment, and other times a single path floating inexplicably forward. Again, not an issue with this game, but more of a conscious decision to focus in on speed over exploration. This Sonic level has its own thrilling climax, with the final floor right before the goal ring falling. If you were low on time and arrived here, I could imagine it'd be quite nail-biting. Highlighting the intended new player experience shines a light on design elements, and I think it's easy to lose what the first experience feels like with the game. Maybe I'm trying to recapture my own memories. This game brings a smile to my face whenever I play, talk, or think about it. Sonic stages are highly curated, focused roller coaster rides. The regular highs are planned out with cool set pieces, or an engaging platform bit like this small end area. Also, this is an example of me getting an A rank despite losing a life. It can happen, but it makes it significantly harder. I can tell with the amount of yapping I've done. I'm going to need plenty of B-roll footage for all of Sonic's levels. I hope you've been enjoying the extra sections as Amy. She deserves the love she gets now, and I'm really glad she's become a sort of fourth member of Sonic's group of Eggman fighting buddies. Even if her role within this game is diminished compared to Adventure 1, the fact she gets to tag along, be present, and consistently makes an effort to help is excellent for her character. I feel like Sega intended for her to always end up an important hero to stand alongside Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. But then Heroes contrived a reason to have her be antagonistic towards Sonic, and it's totally out of character for her. She deserves to be a hero and do things. Her whole arc in Adventure 1 was becoming independent, and her arc gets its payoff when Amy saves Sonic from prison. Is this getting off topic? Maybe a bit, but we have plenty more to say about Amy, because she does get to do some things in the plot later on. Testing the whistle distance reminds me of another happy memory with the Chow Garden. Did anyone else whistle and then run away from your Chow to get them to chase you around the garden? I recall getting 6, 7, 8 of them to do it all at once. I miss the way younger me could find enjoyment in small moments easily. Now it feels like dull moments are most of my... Oh, sorry, that's my alarm going off for when I get too sentimental. If we look closely, we can see Tails flying away from the explosions. Where's Amy? Despite her not being present, Tails didn't forget her. Don't worry. Then, after all those explosions, we rejoin Knuckles' POV at one of the few levels that have no counterpart. Most Hero Story levels come with a Dark Story counterpart. I'll talk about the comparisons more when we get to the dark side, but Pumpkin Hill is one without any match. I think, anyway. Do we count Sky Rail? Sky Rail has the big spooky pumpkin heads and the other design bits, but I don't know, it feels so different and it doesn't attempt to be any bit spooky. I'll have to think about it. Anyway, Knuckles has zero story to discuss because it is as simple as there are emerald pieces here. I must collect them. Knuckles has a bit of a horror theme going on with a few of his levels, which is a great pace switch up that you wouldn't expect. This level is quite vertical, but it's so spread out with there being 3 separate islands that it's still wider than it is long. Haha, Knuckles' last level is more vertical than horizontal, and it can be very painful. Gliding from high place to slightly lower place is Knuckles' bread and butter gameplay, and the act of actually climbing up walls isn't half as fun. More importantly, it's faster to glide than climb, so gliding will always feel better than climbing. I stand still to discern whether the emerald is moving or not, and there it is. Fun fact, the ghost dog I picked up here actually removes animal parts from your Chow, but also teaches them how to be able to wear hats. I had no idea animals taught anything to the Chow. I always thought that they had to reach a certain age before being able to put on hats, or be taught something at the daycare, or maybe even win a challenge in the race or karate. Unbelievably cool detail. Pumpkin Hill even has a train you can interact with. This is overall a great stage due to good pacing, interesting and appropriate environmental design, and a unique theme that really makes it stand out. Oh, and this is also the level where you get the ability to dig. It's rather obvious where you can and cannot dig, and the level signposts clearly good places to dig where emeralds may be with the graves. When Knuckles gets all his upgrades, look at what it looks like when he picks up a Chow. He's literally squishing them. If I look at this scene through a serious lens rather than just memeing it, the background has phrases such as I am great, I am brilliant, I am smart, I am wise, and I am an emperor. Conceited much? It's like we're seeing Eggman's self-help playlist that motivates him to keep getting up in the morning. Anyone else think this cutscene looks like it belongs in Resident Evil 2? The humans here have the same vibe of uncanniness. This walnut busts to show it's actually Eggman's biggest new weapon yet. He straight up shoots a hole in the moon as a threat, and while we all see it as something way more catastrophic in this moment, because doing this sort of thing to the moon would cause an apocalypse on Earth, let's just think about it within the context of the game. Eggman shows what his laser can do without directly firing it at the Earth, and that feels like a very realistic threat for the scope the story goes for. The threat feels incredibly real, even if our world's logic isn't applying to it very well. Blowing up the moon with minimal consequences is not the largest suspension of disbelief, but then when you come into the next part where you hear the characters talking like this,
Look! Half of the moon is gone?
Eggman! Oh, that creep never gives up.
But how did he manage to harness all that energy?
they sound like they're not taking this seriously enough. It's not an appropriate level of shock, fear, anger, anything. There is no putting the moon back together. It's forever like that. It's irreversible damage. They sound like they're not taking it seriously. I'm not miffed over it, but if the characters don't care about the friggin' moon blowing up, then why should I? Video game voice acting was iffy in this time, so it's something I accepted long ago. It has its own quirky charm to it too, don't get me wrong. Charming or not to me, the scene doesn't convey everything it sets out to objectively due to the voice acting. The characters move right on to discussing how they'll find Eggman. Also, To be clear, I'm not advocating they spend more time talking about the moon's destruction. I'm simply saying the acting doesn't convey the severity of the situation, and it deflates the tension somewhat. What Tails says makes sense, but I notice they have him very directly exposit information quite often. More a writing thing than the voice actor's fault, and while he is the brainiac character, mixing in some more emotion could do wonders for this plot, you know, in a potential remake that doesn't exist.
Three of you? That means me too. Hey, wait!
I don't know why Amy is surprised when she was the one who broke Sonic out of a government compound. I'm glad she realized that she's just as much a criminal as the other two at least. This is another example of Amy also being tossed aside for a gag that is not very funny. To reiterate, seeing Amy like this doesn't make me mad per se. I just don't find the delivery of the running gag to be funny. To each their own, of course. Mission Street is our second Tails level, and a level that normally gives you the hover power-up. It's a mixture between City Escapes locale and Radical Highway, albeit more the latter than the former. Question: it said elude the police, but what Tails does is basically go to war with them by blasting his way through. That wanted poster is gonna rack up a higher bounty fast, isn't it? Also, let's stop and look at the little details on it. They don't have a confirmed date of birth or place of birth, nor an occupation or nationality. You know what they put for complexion? Fox. I suppose them lacking this information confirms something I asked in Sonic Adventure 1, whether or not Tails was required to get a license for any flying he does. They definitely have this information if he did, so I guess Tails is just allowed to fly around completely unregulated as an 8-year-old, everybody. Jump scare robot. Literally out of nowhere. I actually want to comment on Mission Street's music. Let's allow it to play out for a moment. Doesn't it sound sort of melancholic, simultaneously hopeful, but also sad? I feel it does a good job of reflecting the sort of feelings Tails must be having going against the government. They've forced his hand, but he's going to stand beside Sonic whether the world is against him or not. Get yourself a friend that will help you evade police pursuit. Notice my strategy of jumping and flailing my controls around to lock onto as much as possible? It really does work. Without memorizing the level's enemy spawns, the best strategy is just go forward. Oh, you can shoot the wanted posters. I like that detail a lot, actually. Where was I? Oh, the best strat is to go forward and flail your camera around just in case some enemies ahead only drop down when you're in proximity. Why do they have this poor Phoenix in a cage? That's Eggman behavior, not government behavior. I also like this mini gorilla about to plummet into the black void below. Have the animals broken out of the zoos and all this chaos? Mission Street is very one path forward, and you can see how this can get aggravating if you don't enjoy Tails' gameplay, right? Outside of the combo-focused score attack, platforming is non-existent or trivial. Ah, see? There are consequences for the moon having a hole in it. Random earthquakes. I get randomly stuck trying to move forward and hit for it, and while I see the camera pointing upwards towards the road about to fall down, you can't even move underneath it before it falls. Or you can. I've seen other people do it. I don't know why there was an invisible wall here for me. It happens a second time, and this does portray that the government is in a reckless panic to capture the three. Do they think they're in cahoots with Eggman? Probably, actually. They're bombing their own city to get them, which could make sense if you consider the Earth itself would be blown up in 24 hours. I'd probably be a bit reckless too. How about another fun Chow fact? The Phoenix I got teaches Chow how to wag their tails. You would think a mythical creature would teach something way more grand than that, but that's what it does. Unrelated, but I remember looking very closely at my Chow each time I entered the garden, trying to see what type of adult Chow they become. The fact that Chow appearances shift gradually as you give them things is so cool, but that complexity is also why I think the Chow Garden hasn't been brought back via fan project yet. At least not fully. It's probably not easy to code and model for. Straight to Knuckles' stage without any fanfare. He really is disconnected off in his own world for the first half of the hero story. We've once again got all the spooky theming around the aquatic mine. I know having these pipes consistently throughout levels is so we know exactly what they are for, but sometimes these pipes are out in space, man. Is this really all that functionally different from having the animal in question wandering around in that area? Then I guess I'd be asking why a gorilla was in space, right? Aquatic mine is designed more vertical than horizontal, but the challenge being navigating the water in its 3 levels. It's often less about finding the emerald's location, and more about discovering how to get to said location. It can be quite confusing, and is more puzzle-like than any other Knuckles level. It's an interesting departure, but I don't know of anyone scrambling to replay Aquatic Mine. The only replay this level gets is if you miss the air necklace power-up in it, because Cannon Core becomes very difficult without it. They only use water for Knuckles twice, and it's likely for the best. I could see it working better if this was more fleshed out, like Knuckles having the ability to drill dive up or down in the water. If we could go fast with him in the water, it'd be fun to traverse, but with the cramped spaces the water is in, they wouldn't work in this level anyway. I am still of the opinion we could have a Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie Collectathon starring Knuckles exploring huge levels for emerald pieces. I love how big the cat can be found in every single level. He's always putting himself in some sort of peril. I noticed this level has next to no enemies besides the ghosts. With the level being mostly filled with water, you can't exactly have robots down there that aren't fish-like. It's a very quaint, puzzle-focused level that I can appreciate for being different, even if it sometimes gets frustrating to find exactly where the emerald pieces are. Some of the frustration comes from player error too, but in the heat of the moment, it can feel like it's the game's fault you're not having any fun. Taking a step back to review my own gameplay really shows that to me. The camera is just hating me for some reason here. Also, there's a spike enemy moving around in the water here randomly. Why? I don't know, but nothing was stopping them from putting more enemies in this level and giving Knuckles a moveset underwater to defend himself. Water levels are so often hated because it reduces the character's moveset down and slows down gameplay, while also tending to not have as tightly designed gameplay as the rest of the game. Dig on the slope? Wow, thank you. See now why these hints can be so poor? My one criticism of the stage is putting the switch to completely empty the water out at the top of the level. The other 2 switches are right besides each other, so why is this one off on its own? I understand it's because it makes the level easy to traverse, so it should be hidden, but if you don't look carefully, you might not even know it exists. I think you could achieve a similar goal of inhibiting people's ease of access to the 3rd switch by putting it behind a cage or something that you need to open first. It'd eliminate the potential confusion, and the solution could be hidden in a room full of ghosts hiding in wooden boxes, with only one box housing the switch that opened the door to this level 3 water control switch. Also, partially a scale issue on my part. Alternatively, they could simply not group the first 2 switches together, thus creating no expectation that those are the only 2 switches in the level. I still appreciate Aquatic Mine for what it is. It's not a crazy great level, but it's good and memorable without being too much of an issue to clear. My least favorite thing about the Char Garden has to be when the animals go up to the entrance and just run into the darkness. If you try to go pick them up, you'll enter the load zone and leave, which kicks you out of the garden when you're playing story mode. Second worst thing, trying to feed your child drives and animals, but they insist on going off to swim every time you leave them unoccupied for but a second. These sleeping animations are so cute.
Sheesh, there always seems to be a lot of police around when you don't need them.
The amount of people that agree with what Sonic says here in 2025 is probably something the developers never anticipated. Knuckles also finally gets to interact with people again. He's been doing his own thing since Wild Canyon. I like how Amy is trying to jump into the sewers to hide from the police too. Unfortunately, she's left behind again after Tails creates plot lines to follow. See what I mean about it happening over and over? Oh boy, everyone's favorite driving section. I don't know why this exists, but it does. Maybe Tails thinks driving along the highway would be faster than flying a plane? Maybe he's trying to sneak up on the president's limo? Maybe they just wanted us to zoom down a highway with interesting controls. Sega does always have that creative, experimental spirit in them, it seems. Sadly, it's not too fun to do this. It's very basic driving, and you will hear this constant screeching if you activate the drifting mode, which involves taking your finger off the accelerate button and pressing it again. Without it, your turning is incredibly stiff. I feel like this level could be significantly improved by adding more rings to it. Rings collected give you a boost, and maneuvering to collect rings would make these rather plain streets more enjoyable.
Tails, did you find the president?
Could anyone ever imagine Sonic saying something like this back when they played Sonic 1 on the Sega Genesis? Did anyone ever think Tails would be ramming families off the road in their cars?
Yeah, I found the president.
Could you imagine Mario saying something like that? I found the president.
Emergency meeting has been called. Mr. President, this is a national crisis.
It's more than that. It's a global crisis. The Earth is going to be blown up. Damn, his hands are huge. Honestly, this has to be peak Eggman. He's making demands of the president here. You don't just make demands to the head of a humongous power structure lightly. He's got the power to, as he puts it,
Otherwise,
Your country will cease to exist.
these are some serious stakes, and Eggman holds almost all the cards to play. Without Sonic and company, they'd have no choice but to surrender to him. Speaking of, Sonic just jumps right into the president's limo and immediately begins to taunt Eggman without a care in the world. The way he casually reassures the president is maximum cool, and if Sonic told me he's got me covered, I'd believe I was in safe hands. At the end of this scene, they drop a line that is obviously in reference to Rouge, and that's a nice touch of interconnectivity.
Mr. President, we're receiving an incoming signal from our agent.
Knuckles leads them straight into this pyramid that is acting as Eggman's secret base, and I guess he and Amy came here first? He almost doesn't even seem to care about the threat as much as Rouge being around.
and more importantly, I saw that Batgirl go inside with him as well.
Tails stepping up here made me roll my eyes, since I didn't really want to play as him again after just playing as him prior. I was really itching for a Sonic stage. Hidden Base isn't even that bad of a level. It's a good aesthetic and starts to ramp up the danger factor present in the mech stages. Eggman plastering his face over everything everywhere really makes it difficult to believe this is a secret base, but the fact he didn't announce it on the news itself is pretty secretive for his standard. Look, he's on literally everything. They sure do get a ton of use out of the conveniently placed dynamite all over this game, don't they? Hell, even Gamma was blowing up some in his levels in SA1. It is fun to make these huge platforms drop, and getting more use out of the blaster for navigation is only a good thing. Some more variants would be nice, but you can't deny the clarity of a huge stack of dynamite being an obvious target to blow up. Check out my skills. Sometimes you don't lock onto enemies you look at, so doing a second or third pass is the best way to guarantee you get all the enemies in an area. It's muscle memory for me at this point to spin around like a spinning top whenever playing mech stages. I really have to ask, what's stopping Tails from going around with a little blaster on foot? The mech is cool and all while emphasizing his genius, but running around in Sonic style would be more fun and allow Tails to have the fun factor of the game's momentum and platforming in his gameplay. Wouldn't have worked for paralleling Eggman's gameplay, but they could bring it back and make it fun in a new entry. I guess they gave actual guns to Shadow and that didn't work out, so they probably wouldn't go for it again. Side note, do you think the resurgence of Shadow with Shadow Generations and the third Sonic movie means we might see guns being used again in the Sonic verse? Would they bring back that part of his gameplay? Also, don't mind my Chow swimming beneath the surface of the garden. While trying to save my Chow from forever swimming, I see Tails' twin tails physics bug out whenever I whistle. What's that about? Eventually, going in and out of the Chow races gets things fixed, and I look at how messed up I can get Tails' two tails. Does anyone know what's actually going on with his physics when this happens? Thought to ask because it's such an oddity, and the only place we can see it is in the Chow Garden. Now we get back to the Sonic gameplay I love. This level features quite a bit of optional wall running, and I attempt to do it, but either my control stick isn't precise enough, or the wall running physics are harder than they should be. Jumping through the hoops is super cool, but struggling to get an angle to jump through them with these physics makes it a little less fun. Someone who's played this game tons before, can't even do it well, so what about that first time experience for new players? The big gimmick of this level are these hourglasses you need to hit in order to open doors or create platforms to ascend upwards. This feels like another natural progression of the challenges the devs are giving us. They've given us freedom before, but now they're putting us under strict time limits to test our movement. Also, look who it is. Gamma. Sonic doesn't even acknowledge it, just busts them like any other bot. It's nice to see him back, but like this, it makes his tale even more tragic. How many other bots could have had that chance at autonomy to make a difference, but didn't get it? The animals inside must be freed, so it's the right thing to do, but poor Gamma. We also get access to the bounce bracelet on this level, and in all honesty, the bounce bracelet is just as great as the drop dash in terms of how integral this feels to fun, fast Sonic gameplay. As an example, if you're doing tight platforming, you can keep the speed up by bouncing to sort of reset your jump, if that makes sense. It's similar to the boost formula Stomp, but the bounce is superior for this gameplay style. The Stomp serves the boost formula games better by design, but when it comes to the adventure games, the bounce keeps the speed up the same way the drop dash does, and should really make a comeback if they ever return to a more adventure-style gameplay. We have a whole section here dedicated to carrying these keys around, and it's undeniably the low point of the stage. It nerfs your physics significantly, and if it appeared more than this, it'd bring Pyramid Cave down significantly. This long hallway really shows that getting those upper rings are a feat only the truly skillful can achieve. Apparently, this hallway is so intense that it causes my frames to drop too. This level is another Sonic one that is a single path forward with only minor deviations, and while the focus makes it a tight experience with many opportunities to earn extra points, I wish there were alternate paths with different challenges that weren't high path versus low path exclusively. It's a fun stage, don't misunderstand my words. I simply wish there was more of it. I swear, every time you give a Chow any kind of drive or animal, they are always bolting straight to the water. It doesn't matter if they know how to swim or not, they're gonna go for it. Just stay on land a little bit longer so I can turn you into a super Chow that can beat all the other Chow in the races, okay? This cutscene is purely for establishing why the next level exists. The best part about it is the little smirk Sonic gives Knuckles before asserting he's the world's greatest treasure hunter. And a wink, can't forget that. Death Chamber brings back the timed doors, but they don't feel like they have as strong an intent behind them for Knuckles. The consistency is great to see, since this is the same area, but they're not testing your ability to sprint through a platforming section like Sonic's stage. Who would have thought the key would be below the obvious wall marking? It doesn't help the exclamation point was going off on the spot I thought it was. Big's also right here if you're curious. Always nice to see him. If you check the map the game provides you, you'll see that it's divided up into 3 smaller areas that are all interconnected with a middle area. This is a level that has almost 0 opportunities for gliding besides the middle area, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. Gliding around is probably the most fun you can have as Knuckles in Rouge, but it's not like he moves particularly slowly on the ground either. Everything being interconnected with hallways challenges you more on the navigation front, and while punching through boxes with your new power-up is some fun, it really doesn't compare to the fun of gliding through the air. Every issue of these levels is also exacerbated by the Emerald Radar. If it just functioned like it does with mods, the treasure hunting gameplay would be drastically improved. However, because it doesn't, you end up doing laps around these levels if you are unlucky, or you just use hints. These levels have to be significantly high quality for the amount of time one can potentially spend in them. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Emerald Radar was changed solely to pad out the level's runtime, and that decision severely compromises the enjoyment of these levels. The Ghost does not like Knuckles wearing a cute little mask. There's also digging through walls to transport around. I like the sense of discovery going through them, and they're another little navigational gimmick to keep in the back of your mind and spices up this level to make it more unique. As a final note, the level having us look for keys is a great way to give Knuckles more to do than only collecting Master Emerald pieces. There's a lot that can be done with this gameplay style, and I would love to see a modern take on it. Come here, Chapon. Time for your fitness enhancements. See? Look at how excited he is. I think the unibrow has to be the ugliest part you can get on your Chow. It's always this deep shade of blue, which will more often than not clash with the color scheme of your Chow. The end of the Knuckles horror arc. Even if this boss is one of the most random things to be included in the game as a whole, I think it's a good boss. My favorite thing about the boss is, if your movement is perfect, you can squeeze 2 hits out. I believe I did it in my Bit Crushed initial playthrough once. Sure, the boss only requires you to move away from it, but there's a balance in not running too far ahead of it, otherwise King Boom Boom will change directions and prevent you from hitting the hourglass behind him. Once the hourglass is flipped, you dig out the shadow of King Boom Boom to make him vulnerable. He gets a bit more difficult to chase down after every hit, but nothing too complicated. This fight really highlights the fact that Knuckles desperately needed another animation for when he's running fast enough. In Adventure 1, if you got some speed going, Knuckles would shift to a sprinting animation. Knuckles jogging with his arms and legs moving at the pace of a jet engine's fan was something I'd grown accustomed to, but when my friends saw it after having next to no experience with the game, it made them laugh at its absurdity.
That was pretty rough.
I do like the bit of characterization they give Knuckles being afraid of the ghosts. It's just neat to have that extra detail about him.
Come and get some, Eggman.
There's that Sonic charm. Eggman weaponizing some ancient being for his own nefarious schemes is good fun, but back-to-back boss fights? It's odd pacing to have smack dab in the middle of the game. It really challenges your ability to platform quick, and I do remember struggling on it as a kid. Now, it looks effortless, and I fell this boss in a minute 20. If you spin dash every time it starts up an attack, you'll avoid its attacks without much issue. Falling down requires you to quickly jump out of the quicksand, and I like that it isn't just a pit that ends your run right there. An inoffensive, good boss. This time anyway. Off to space we go. It's a cutscene interested in looking epic, and epic it looks. Sonic and Co. have a little malfunction flying, and all the emerald pieces are lost in space. I'm surprised Sonic is acting so carefree about it, and I'm just going to let this last part play out in full. The pacing of this game's dialogue goes against all dialogue rules. I believe it's an English dub exclusive issue, but still, a funny growing pain from Sega to witness firsthand.
This place was shut down about 50 years ago because of a terrible accident. The first Bernoulli spherical space colony, called Ark.
See? He's the lore dump guy. Sonic re-establishes the stakes at hand, and Tails pulls up a map of the Ark. How does he get access to this? I guess he's been doing his research?
It doesn't it? But in fact, it's a fake one I created after researching the real emerald. It has the same wavelength and properties, but it's less powerful than the real one.
Okay, the fake Chaos Emerald is an interesting plot point that they get lots of use out of, but how do you... I'm not even going to ask the question. What I will say is, Tails explains the properties of his fake emerald, and the way Eggman initially finds out about the fake emerald ploy is hilarious. It's the silliest oversight from Tails' part, but it's the sort of thing you could easily overlook yourself in Tails' shoes. And then there's them ignoring Amy again. How many times have they done this stunt now? Oh boy, Eternal Engine. The last Tails mech stage of the hero story. The green code creeping up inside of the walls makes me think this whole place is some supercomputer. I love that environmental theming a lot, actually. It really sells how this place was one of the best research facilities at one point. The whole place is a literal computer. This room, after our short ascent, introduces us to these odd sections on the ship. They don't do anything in this room, but in the next, we see dynamite over them. If you go on autopilot through here, because let's face it, there's been nothing up until this point, you shouldn't shoot the second you see it. You open airlocks into friggin' space. If you get too close, you get sucked out, and that's a life gone. Well, I guess introducing an instant death state that is caused 110% by the player's own negligence adds a thrill to this mech stage that I kind of appreciate. As I've said before, up until this point, you shot at everything you could lock onto. Now you have to think about your positioning in regards to your shots. You still want to shoot the dynamite too, because they add up to your combo all the same. So you often want to lock onto them, move forward past the danger, and then fire off. Of course, these rooms have hazards and other enemies that will make you drop your laser if hit. And the enemies you'd also like to add to your combo, sweep through the room quickly before leaving. If you want the highest possible score you can get, you really need to be on your toes throughout this level. This one room is a cheap trick though. You can't see the switch behind the boxes, and if you shoot for the Chow key, you'll open up the back and get sucked out while attempting to get the switch. You'll only fall for it once, but after just introducing the mechanic not too long ago, I'm willing to bet plenty of us got shot into outer space on our first runs through. Thanks, Omo Chow. I'm sure the people without eyes appreciate your help. These outdoor sections may look dangerous, but with the forgiving hover, they're really not. When we head through this door, we see a brand new enemy for the first time. This is an artificial chaos, and they're all over the Ark. They're much more difficult than the gun robots or Eggman's robots at the pyramid. They come in multiple different forms, but this one hides its head until it's ready to attack. Don't even try to add them into combos, because your missiles will bounce off. Introducing them in an isolated room is classic level design 101, letting us figure things out on our own in a controlled environment. This outdoor portion is quite difficult, with robots flying around from all angles blasting at us, giving us one chance to bop them before they're gone. They'll come from front, side, behind, and it's great stuff. While not the peak of Mecha Gameplay Challenge, this is a reasonable challenge for the final Tails stage. In terms of difficulty, I don't notice a huge difference between the Hero and Dark Story. Dark Story seems a little harder if I had to weigh one over the other, albeit because Shadow's tubetacular level and Super Rouge Galaxy suffer from lots of jank. There's these ball-shaped artificial chaos. They don't retract into their mass, but they'll still attack when you get close. I had a damn hard attack when the ground below me broke here. You don't expect it to be the whole path, but they subvert your expectations in a fun way. I don't think anyone's dying from this, so it's just a fun little heart attack, not a deadly heart attack. Big difference. I wonder if the way I tap my hover is muscle memory from playing Silver and Omega in Sonic 06. You know what I'm talking about if you've played as them. And my button mashing made me lose a life. Damn it all. Watch my score drop all the way down back to 0. That's so demotivating to see, and I think I stopped putting in any effort at all to getting my score back up. Can you blame me? Also, Big is just chilling here to the right. When floating in outer space at this section, it makes aiming at enemies a whole toss-up. Another artificial chaos hits me before I even open the door, which feels cheaper the second time it happens, and we get a sequence similar to the end of Gamma's story in SA1, specifically his final stage. You can go down easily enough without trying to maximize your combo, but when you do, it is tons of fun. It's the epitome of what makes these stages fun, even if it is the only thing, unfortunately. You can tell they really got a hang of what makes mech stages fun, but it gets held back by the stiff control and nigh non-existent platforming challenges in our platforming game. Wow, an E rank. I'd rather they not reset your score to 0 upon dying in long levels like this. If I die, keep the timer where it was and make it so my time bonus will be significantly lower, but don't take away all of my hard-earned progress. If you want a perfect run from the player, the most I'm willing to do in a difficult level in a Sonic game is around 3 or so minutes. While we're in the Chow Garden this time, I want to talk a bit more about the artificial chaos. Not only is this a connection to chaos from SA1, but it says a lot that the US government greenlit these projects, attempting to weaponize something similar to chaos for their own questionable needs. The further we get into Sonic Adventure 2, the more they call back to and directly reference SA1. And in this replay, I really came to appreciate the continuity present. I've almost forgotten what it's like for any Sonic game to have direct continuity with one another. Maybe with the success of the movies, we'll move back to games that build off of one another's stories and world. A man can hope and dream. Sonic and Tails get their comeuppance for constantly leaving Amy behind, with Eggman capitalizing on it like a proper villain would. Something happened to Amy, but we don't get to know any more right now. It's Knuckles time. The way the hero story fits together is really inhibited by the way Knuckles is integrated into the overall plot. I don't know why Knuckles is treated like this at all. This would flow so much better if the Knuckles level came before the Tails one, because we could simply follow his perspective after he ditches the group for his Emerald. After his level, we could hop back to Sonic, Tails, and Amy talking about the Ark, and I just had another idea. During the time Knuckles is collecting the Emerald pieces and fighting Rouge, the rest of the group could have been implied to be exploring the Ark and come across a computer that contains the information Tails reads off. This would solve the disjointed random expositing he does, well, at least in this instance, and it would make the pace of the overall story a bit tighter feeling. Now, to actually talk about Meteor Herd, we start off on the very bottom of the stage, given a wide open area to explore around. The way Knuckles leaves footprints across the glass is a nice touch that deserves credit. When you finish checking the ground level, you climb up the center structure, and the camera panning upwards shows you just how vertical this level is. It's probably the most vertical level in the game, with only Rouge's own final stage being a potential competitor. Knuckles' ability to go upwards is non-existent out of his jump, so falling and missing a jump requires you navigating the one path upwards to get back. It happens on a smaller level when I miss this one Emerald piece that's moving between the crates. Also, the vertical nature of the stage means that missing something at the very top means it's a long way back up. Overall, this level feels like it has very little focus and is needlessly bloated. There's a lot of dead air, and since the Emerald radar going off is proximity based, the bigger levels take exponentially longer to clear. As another reminder, without the Emerald radar mod, the level would get significantly longer. I know the empty feeling sort of makes sense because it's space, but it doesn't lead to good level design that is fun to traverse. Good thematically, not so good gameplay. Still, it is an average level at least. I wouldn't say it's bad. We follow Meteor Herd with this other meetup with Rouge, and they resume their beef session immediately like no time had passed at all. The Sonic and Tails PvP fights have been really easy and inoffensive, so you'd think Knuckles can't be too bad, right? Nope, it's horrible. Whenever the middle ground of the level opens up, you get sent on a wild goose chase trying to find where Rouge has ran off to. I get that navigation being the primary challenge of Knuckles' gameplay, but it feels like Rouge makes no effort to come towards you once the middle opens. Even worse, if you are unable to find your opponent for long enough and they're low on health, they will spam attacks at your position from a distance. It's a repeated interruption to the gameplay and punishes you way too much. If it was significantly less frequent, or if Rouge made any active attempt to come towards you for half of the fight, it'd be on the same level as the first Sonic vs. Shadow and Tails vs. Eggman fight. Oh boy, we have the rematches coming up, don't we? I've got plenty to say for those. I don't know how you can interpret this as anything other than sexual tension. This whole scene is framed in such a way that builds the character's dynamic more, and the biggest heel turn in their development happens when Rouge missteps, dramatically falling down into the open pit below. I guess her wings are tired too. Maybe that's the excuse actually, that she was too tired or disoriented. I don't know. They reused this screen from the first cutscene, by the way. Tension is off the charts. I wasn't kidding when I said this scene was primarily for building their relationship. Rouge also returns her share of the emerald pieces after conceding, which makes them just about even.
I'm sorry if I hurt you.
Great development from Adventure 1 where he hadn't even taken accountability for his muck-ups. He did endanger all of his friends just before this on the shuttle, and in SA1, his inability to speak before throwing punches made Eggman get 2 emeralds and partially caused a disaster. He can be naive and manipulated, but Knuckles has developed emotional intelligence over the course of his story in SA2 here, and I wish the cast got more permanent development rather than randomly shifting from jokey to serious game to game. We pick up right from that scene into Crazy Gadget, another Sonic stage. Eggman's not playing around, saying Sonic better hurry if he wants to save Amy's life. Eggman does not hesitate. Sure, he might threaten to rebuild his own empire off the world, but directly life-ending someone is a much darker thing to show on screen. Both are threats, but saying, "I'll take over the world," doesn't have the same impact, now does it? We've also got these funky upside-down rails Sonic starts the stage on, and right after, he doesn't start the stage on them, I lied. And right after, the stage introduces its gravity shifting mechanic. I get why they are literal switches. They want to ensure the player isn't taking any momentum with them when the gravity shifts. However, for stage flow, these would have been better off as buttons that aren't positioned near pits. I say this too because the positioning on the switches is just finicky enough that you will sometimes roll instead of grabbing. It's a minor annoyance, but when I see how the level could be better, I have to put my 2 cents in. Apparently, some of them can reach their arms out for you and shoot lasers at the same time. It really seems like Artificial Chaos can do whatever they want. Having an unpredictable enemy with multiple methods of attack is great stuff for the last few stages of the game. You also get the Flame Ring on this level. It allows you to break steel boxes. That's it. Enough said. We have an iconic room here with the options presented to us. While it's hard to tell which path is forward, they all lead to the same goal. The middle one challenges your reflexes the most, putting you in a free fall towards a singular rail you need to land on. The other ways are safer, but take longer, so pick your poison. I love silent difficulty selections like this. The level itself is asking you how much challenge you want, which lets us be in control of what we're willing to try. It could be signposted a bit better, but I still appreciate it. This Artificial Chaos bursts into a bunch of little gooey giblets. This definitely has to be the weirdest Artificial Chaos of the bunch. Sheesh. They take advantage of the inconsistent homing attacks lock-on as the main challenge, and that is interesting. This enemy wouldn't translate over to the modern games at all with how their systems work. This enemy in particular also remind me of Sonic Adventure 1's Final Egg, with the rooms of infinitely respawning exploding enemies. Funny both enemies ended up in their final levels of their respective games. The electric shields that appear around the gun robots force you to pay attention and not simply mash. I love how this game tries to challenge every aspect of its moveset, making you master it bit by bit. It's easy for me now, but I realized kid me struggling on this stuff had quite a lot on his plate. Games were not messing around back in the day. Don't even get me started on NES hard games. Don't mind me doing 2 random super bounces after not having done them the entire game. I had a random thought to try this late in the game after having never performed it before, and I got it on my first try. It's not hard to perform, but I was pretty proud of myself nonetheless. Yes, this is my fault, but they didn't need to have everything on one button. Putting an action button that you use over pits right next to the button that makes you descend rapidly isn't great design. I'm sure navigating upside down was difficult at one point for me. Another thing I noticed is the code in the walls actually moves the direction you need to be going. That makes this detail twice as cool. Not that you need direction to go in these hallways, but it's a subtle detail that adds a lot to moving forward subconsciously. Like following silent directions, it makes you feel good when you complete the task, if that makes sense. The game is in a subtle harmony with you, wanting you to keep on moving. The repeating design elements of this confined hallway make this stage visually repetitive for a lot of it. It's almost always a hallway, and if it's at a slant, it's always the same angle. Eggman out here keeping it real. Now, for the final room that everyone remembers Crazy Gadget for. You're out in space with the training wheels taken off. If you shift gravity wrong or haven't mastered navigating with the different angles, this section will likely be very challenging. The perspective isn't the easiest to get the hang of, so I don't blame anyone for disliking the level for this. The challenge jumps significantly at the end, and while they did prepare you for this, it's got a confusing, almost puzzle-like structure. Not only that, but you can get to the end and realize your way forward is blocked, which is just a kick in the gut if you've been struggling up until this point. All in all, Crazy Gadget isn't all that crazy until the end, and suffers from a claustrophobic set of hallways with too similar of level geometry. We went through somewhere visually similar already as Tails, and while this is obviously different, the way forward is binary and lacks deviation for most of it. Still, even if I'm being harsh on it, this is still a good level. It's missing all the opportunities like trick ramps or the rings in Pyramid Cave to really show expression of your skill, but it's still good. Sonic's stages set such a high standard at the beginning of the game, and they're all 7s, 8s, and 9s, with City Escapes so close to a 10. Compared to the 8s and 9s, it's clear Crazy Gadget is a 7. Maybe even a 6. Every stage repeats pieces of itself, with even City Escape having those visually similar hallways with a single grind rail. However, they twist and turn in unique ways while also being a minority of the stage, whereas Crazy Gadget is more hallway than crazy. The Chow Garden really deserves more compliments. Coming here between levels is so fun, man. It's short, sweet, and to the point, while also giving the main stages so much more replayability. Genuinely genius. This has to be one of the hardest hitting scenes of Sonic Adventure 2. Eggman holding someone, especially Amy, at gunpoint is something you could only get away with back in the day. This is the most menacing Eggman has ever been. Having Sonic's friends imprisoned is one thing, but it's another thing entirely to be pointing a lethal weapon at one of his closest friends. At any moment, Amy could be gone. Just like that. Sonic only has any confidence here because he thinks he has one up on Eggman.
Handing over the fake emerald, I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Put the emerald down right there and back off.
You've turned into a big-time villain, Doctor.
That confidence is quickly dashed when Sonic is captured and Eggman unveils the ruse with sheer confidence alone.
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails!
Because you just told me, Fox Boy.
Tails telling him also leads to Tails feeling some personal responsibility for what happens next, and it's only doubled, no, tripled, by Sonic giving his presumably last words to both of his friends.
Tails, Amy, take care of yourself.
Sonic's a real one here, because he's not even mad at Tails. He leaves everything to him thinking it might be over, and inadvertently causing your friend to lose his life would shake you or me to the core too. It's a potentially big character moment for everyone here. Of course, we don't lose Sonic. Tails' words ring out in his head, And before we get to see if Sonic finds a way out of this mess, his capsule explodes. Eggman gives Sonic a respectable send-off as his admirable adversary, which is quite the deep cut for how Eggman truly feels. He may not like him, but he respects him and what he's capable of. He even looks a little sad, looking downwards.
Farewell. My now we have
Amy cries out for Sonic, brought immediately to heartfelt sobs. Eggman wastes no time going back to threatening Tails for the real Emerald. While I feel like what Tails says is misworded, the intent here is that Sonic is more so trusting Tails with something of such great weight, aka the fate of the world. Tails resolving himself to fight, despite the shock and grief he likely feels, shows the true strength of his character, and we move forward to a fight with Eggman. It is exactly this moment that made so many Sonic fans feel insulted when Tails' character did the exact opposite in Sonic Forces. He's seen Sonic unalived before, but he didn't devolve into a shaking mess there. While I'm not saying it's unrealistic for an 8-year-old like Tails to react like that, they literally showed the exact opposite in this prior scene in Adventure 2. If they're going to act like everything happened in some continuity in Sonic Frontiers, does this mean Tails had a character regression over the years? Stuff like this is why people viewed the series as a bunch of instances of stories happening in their own little mini universes. The video isn't about Sonic Forces though, and I should probably talk about this, interesting fight behind me. I probably look like I was misplaying here, but from what I came to understand about this fight, you need to end it as quickly as possible after Eggman drops below the health threshold where he fires the laser. After 3 hits, he fires this laser attack that I believe is almost undodgeable. If it hits you, you lose half of your health, and if he fires it twice, good luck surviving. It's best to play it safe until you hit him 3 times, and then blitz him with as much damage as possible. If anyone knows any better way of doing this fight, please let me know in the comments below. I'd genuinely be curious at a better strat. As we can see, Sonic successfully managed to cast Chaos Control with the fake Emerald. It's really nice to see Knuckles show genuine concern for Sonic here. Even just offering a shoulder for him is a huge gesture. Everyone's coming together here, but Sonic also relying on Knuckles to help out Tails and Amy. Final Rush is our final Sonic action stage, and it's quite the doozy. All of Sonic's levels start him off going fast, and this time, a rocket is propelling him forwards onto a rail. I do a trick at the end of this rail, and it makes me realize that trick rings are the simplified version of timing a jump to perform a trick. Sure, it's not as clearly telegraphed, but I like the idea of jumping off rails at the end to do tricks for extra height than the orange or rainbow rings just waiting to be jumped into. The rings feel more automated and less natural than performing a trick off the rail itself. You have to admit, they are one of those Sonic props that remind you that you're going through a glorified obstacle course than a real place. You know what? I need to rant a little longer. Is there some reason why we can't get Sonic Advance's trick system in a new Sonic title? Not only would it be on brand for Sonic to always be doing tricks, but imagine alternate paths were accessed depending on which trick you used. Maybe the forward trick lets you bust through some walls or obstacles, while the up trick lets you get height for an upper path or two. To reiterate, not every place needs to feel like a real, lived-in part of a world, but I feel like Sonic Team's level design is becoming somewhat formulaic in the boost formula. If they want to sell us on Sonic's world, it needs to feel more real and with more personalized identity, not just, here's a trick ring because we don't want to create a sequence for a vine to swing you around in the forest instead. Is what I'm saying making sense? I don't want them to get rid of springs, capsules, boost panels, and rings themselves, but I want them to be used with greater purpose rather than what feels like filler to get a level to a certain length. Now, to actually talk about Final Rush. The sense of scale here is carefully crafted, showing us the earth down below throughout this entire level. There's usually no ground beneath your feet, making every jump all the more vital to get right. They often have you jumping between rails, or at least offering you the challenge to jump to other rails. It's nerve-wracking to get right, but possible. I don't count pushing one of the bumpers on your controller to automatically jump between rails, but actually jumping between them. All these rails go in crazy different directions, giving this level a strong sense of identity despite rails becoming, in my opinion, overused later in the series. We also should remember that I'm using a mod to simplify a system of rail grinding they had in place. Before, you had to lean to pick up speed, but ports broke the sensitivity for it. It's also never explained all too well. Going this fast down rails would require your careful input and paying attention, whereas now, you jump on a rail and then you go, no questions asked. I don't know how good this mechanic was in its original form, because I never experienced it on the Dreamcast original release, and from my understanding, there's no mod out there currently that restores Dreamcast rail grinding. I've heard some people say that you can circumvent this by repeatedly tapping the direction that you want to lean towards, but it still sucks that a bug broke such an integral system like this. These upward-facing rails challenge you to get speed going onto them, and while it's not hard to do so with a homing attack, using a dash panel or spring, or following a trail of rings, it takes more effort than boosting does with just one button. Not to bash even more on the boost formula, which I do enjoy, but it has simplified Sonic's moveset and physics down to a point where I'm starting to lose interest with the formula. It doesn't help that I feel like Unleashed had the best levels for the boost formula, making you really feel like you're traveling immense distances. Every other boost game has been a downgrade in visual fidelity and level look. Sure, the stuff after Sonic Unleashed doesn't look bad, but Unleashed was breathtakingly beautiful and made you feel like you were traversing an insane amount of ground. Honestly, it might have been the peak of the boost formula in terms of the day stages. Damn, I should make a video on Sonic Unleashed. Oh, but there's Sonic Heroes and Sonic 06. Oh, too many choices right now. I might be talking about other games more than this stage, huh? From how I see it, this stage has a lot of good talking points to compare to other games. These sections do not hold your hand at all. It's either make or break, no in between. We're far from the days of big trucks chasing us down. Precision is the name of the game here. You get rewarded with speed if you can land the difficult jumps onto the rails, and there aren't even all that many enemies throughout the level to impede you. I went for this crazy rail and hit it, but at the wrong direction. That's a high amount of skill to ask the player to execute on. Wow. They're basically begging you to try and jump onto these other rails every step of the way, flaunting the challenge before you, and they want you to try it. Once more, we have a climactic end piece to finish off the stage. Similar to City Escape's end, we're running from a ton of debris down an even steeper incline. It's definitely not as bold or exciting as the rest of the level, but they still signpost the oncoming end with a final, tense set piece like they have for the rest of Sonic's levels. His stages have been so well designed, carefully structured from beginning to end, to challenge you all the way. I have to give huge credit to the big ends to the levels for him, making sure the end to the levels is as hype as it can possibly be. There's plenty of Sonic levels that just end unceremoniously throughout the series, even within this game for the other characters, and this detail deserves all the love it can get. Our final trip to the garden on the hero side. Sonic slips in a few pets before the hero story's final act. Of course, Shadow had to greet us here. They aren't just beefing now, instead having a mutual respect for one another's abilities. Respect or not, they are still enemies, so we progress to the final fight with the cheesiest line from Shadow.
I see, but you know, I can't let you live. Your adventuring days are coming to an end.
This game is called Sonic Adventure, guys. Unbelievably cheesy. This is a perfect shot to start this epic fight. They're both in a race to the finish rather than fighting in a small arena, taking advantage of their abilities. This changes the fight less than you'd think, because Shadow hardly does anything really, unfortunately. He only fights back, and if you cut too far ahead of him, you have this lengthy waiting for him to cast Chaos Control every single time. Almost every time you hit him, he will pop off screen and need time to spawn back in. Objectively, this is not a well-designed fight, because it can hardly be considered one. If you get ahead of him without completely blitzing past him, he will attempt to homing attack you, but it's too telegraphed to be threatening. I ended up discovering the best way to do the latter half of this fight once Shadow gets low enough, and while not completely safe, it is consistent if you're patient. Don't mind me falling off because I was impatient though. For the first 3 hits, just somersault into him or spin dash. On the final 2 hits, bait him into jumping up with a homing attack, and then right when he lands, just hit him again with another homing attack and it should go through. Homing attack spamming is how you'll accidentally fall off. It's an epic fight built up to expertly with great stakes, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. Ah well, the game's 20 years old, so I'm not gonna fault them too hard for this. Does it seem like I'm just giving this game a pass because it's old? I am definitely giving it a nostalgia advantage, huh? Let's try to be objective for a second. All of the PvP fights in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are bad. They're either so easy that there's zero challenge, or they're easy but have a frustrating element that can drag it out very long. This is easily a point of improvement if they ever remake this game, because these fights themselves and where they take place are great for the overall story in most cases. Let's check back in on Tails and Amy, who have defeated Eggman. While busy grieving their friend's loss, Eggman sneaks the emerald that, I guess, Tails just left on the floor, and just before the cannon fires, Tails and Amy witness their beloved blue hedgehog stopping the firing just in the nick of time. Bro's flashing us a thumbs up in the middle of space like it isn't a big deal. With that, we enter the credits and the hero story is completed. Overall, a great side of the story, but a weirdly paced one that has many bits and pieces that don't quite fit together as well as they should. The pacing repeatedly gets dropped whenever Knuckles interjects in the early game, and some of these levels felt like they were put in simply for runtime reasons. None of the stages themselves are outright bad to me, so I don't mind their inclusion. It's a fun side of the story to play through in a game sense, but on the story front, it really is just the heroes reacting to everything the dark side is doing. Very little is revealed on their side of things, such as Shadow's appearance, what Rouge is all about, and how Eggman found out about all this, but that's very intentional due to the dark side story's existence. Should I criticize the absence of those things in the hero story if I know the dark story fills in the gaps? I'm not entirely sure. As a full package, most stuff does end up being explained, but separately, it leaves the hero story a bit empty on the story front, besides the fun of course, and there's plenty of quality fun here. I'd say it's acceptable at the very least, because fun is what's most important in interactive experiences. So many games have existed without stories, and while a great story can enhance a game's fun factor, they are unneeded. The prevalence of games with very little gameplay also show that stories can exist without much game behind them, but it's clear to me that both are better together when done well. How would I fix the hero's narrative? I don't think I would alter too much story structure-wise, but I'd focus on improving the dialogue between characters, better explaining their feelings and character dynamics, having the characters show clearer emotions, and some other touch-ups would make the stakes have more weight. I think the hero story is fine being more reactive, but improvements of voice direction and some writing could really tie the hero story together much, much better. Leaving the bigger story reveals to the dark side story is fine, but giving the hero story better character moments would make it feel more even. However, talking about the dark side story like this without having went over it is difficult, so I think it's about time we switched sides and see the other side of everything. Everyone going into this definitely wants more info on Shadow. We open with Eggman invading a gun facility, and he gloats about how simple a task it's been getting inside. Then Eggman exposits for us, which I'll just let him say.
That was all too easy. Let's take a look at what my grandfather was working on. A top-secret military weapon. The military shut down the research because they feared it.
Is this Eggman's first playable appearance? No, he was playable in Sonic Drift and Sonic R. For mainline games, this should be, and he's in a mech that operates one-to-one the same as Tails' does. Let's look at this level through the lens of how it tutorializes the gameplay, since you can play either side of the story to start off with. There are a couple enemies impeding our path without the means of retaliating, and moving a bit more forward has a gate close in front of us. You have to lock on to 4 corners of the door to proceed, and that ensures you understand the basic gameplay of the mechs. This level is pretty basic on the gameplay front, so I want to talk about the level's design some more. So far, this is Prison Lane with the lights turned off. Instead of going through the same exact levels with slightly different tweaks or areas exclusive to a character, we get levels with similar thematics but different level design. Some is definitely reused, like these halls Tails has went through almost one for one in spots, but this is the same base Tails goes through. I don't take issue with it at all, and other levels that are clear reflections of other ones do a whole lot to switch things up and keep it fresh. As an example of the major difference between this and Prison Lane, instead of busting bots to open jail bars, literally busting Sonic out of jail, Eggman is busting down gates himself to go deeper in. They could have been lazy and reused the bars if they wanted, but they didn't, and this small detail helps Iron Gate set itself apart from the same prison lane DNA. It's also really dark and spooky, so you feel like you're not supposed to be here. This alternate path atop the pipes houses a little dragon, a rare animal that you cannot normally get to without the hover power-up. I get antsy waiting for the elevator to try and score more points, but muck it up in my impatience. However, the fact I'm able to come back to this level and speed things up for a higher score is great design. The slow elevator serves to give you ample opportunity to try chaining enemies together in a zero-threat situation, which nudges you further towards understanding the mech gameplay. This isn't as great after a prior hero playthrough, since you already know how to do everything most likely, but it's not so basic as to be entirely devoid of any gameplay enjoyment. The end of Eggman's level does something similar to Sonic's story, having a final set piece to send off the level. For this, it's just going up here and firing the missile. It's no being chased by a truck, that's for sure, but I appreciate them trying to give Eggman something similarly epic to end off his level. How many times am I going to say Iron Gate is a fine enough start to the dark story? The hero story definitely opens up much, much stronger, but getting to play as Eggman for the first time has some cool factor in it too. He wouldn't be zooming down city streets, so it's natural he'd have a slower level. It's still good, but definitely nowhere near as exciting as playing through City Escape. Seeing Eggman take care of Chow is almost out of character for him, considering he was imprisoning them before they were even born in Sonic Adventure 1. But hear me out. The main thing Eggman wants throughout the Sonic series is to rule. He's willing to go about achieving that by force, but just because he does a little violence, it doesn't mean he's incapable of taking care of others. Hell, his goal is to rule the world, which involves making executive decisions on its care. In my mind, Eggman sees himself as the most competent, so he should be the one leading everyone. Sure, he's also insane and goes about it all wrong, but some part of his desire is born from wanting to lead. Many people don't. More proof that this man shouldn't be leading anything, he'd give any baby he gets his hands on shaken baby syndrome. It perfectly fits with his character to not know how to give proper affection and nurture someone else. Another nice attention to detail. After our little Chow Garden intermission, we get to see what it was Eggman is after. Maria is an awful, awful password, but considering how old Eggman's grandfather is, what else would you expect? Someone of his age would obviously have a completely dog water password. Is it ever explained what the yellow floating bit in the sphere is? Is it just Shadow's life support? Okay, pause again. If Shadow wasn't clearly illuminated, if we looked at just his shadow, maybe, and only maybe with a pinch of salt, could I mistake him for Sonic. However, with how this scene's lighting is, it's obviously not. I want to talk about how Shadow presents himself here. He acts like he's some genie being released from his lamp, offering a wish to Eggman. That sounds odd, doesn't it? However, with additional context, you can see Eggman was actually being manipulated by Shadow into working towards Shadow's own goal. Let's get past this boss battle before continuing. The fight ahead is identical to the fight Sonic has, right down to the boxes within the arena to jump up on. Sure, there's a few less of them, and the boss fires a little laser at you instead of landing for missiles, but it's functionally the same.
Pathetic humans.
Pathetic humans. Damn, Shadow, you can't say that. That's specious. After a display of his power, Eggman's impressed. Shadow villain monologues at the villain, saying he will grant him one wish only after he collects more Chaos Emeralds and brings them to the Ark. Eggman is left stunned from here, and it's clear as day to you and I that Shadow's manipulating the Doctor's ego to get what he wants from him. He's got an ulterior motive. Ooh, spooky. Rouge's cutscene is 100% identical to Knuckles, but with her theme playing instead.
Just let it go. You just don't know.
This video is long enough, so there's no reason for me to go over it twice and pad the runtime. Let's just skip to her first level, Dry Lagoon.
All of these sins are mine to bear.
Dry Lagoon opens with similar level geometry to Knuckles, but instead of an air draft going up, she has a well of water that takes her down to another area. Freeing the poor turtle from the gun robot's sexual harassment allows you to traverse the well. As opposed to the dry area Knuckles is in, Rouge's is full of greenery and water aplenty. They're opposites, but the structures are similar in an intentionally contrasting way. This speaks to Rouge's and Knuckles' characters very clearly to me. They're both opposites in plenty of ways, but are like reflections of one another in others. Their surface level details are opposites, but deep down, there's a closer understanding than they realize. To put it simply, they're like two sides of the same coin. This stage exemplifies this more than most other stage combos and character combos, and it's a huge strength of Sonic Adventure 2's theming. See how the second area is the same as Knuckles' upper area? The long hallways directly across from each other? One pathway has the box-like structures, the other has a statue. These levels are built off of the same DNA, but veer off in their own slightly different direction with intention. Wild Canyon was a great starting level, and because this level is basically the same level but flipped, Dry Lagoon is also great. The two levels are even better together once you make the same connection I have, and I think they're some of the best designed levels when it comes to the hero and dark reflection theming. Let's have another Chow intermission. Rouge's design as a character in this game is very provocative. Let's all admit it. No one can deny that she looks good. She was meant to be a character that embraces her feminine sexuality. I'd say it's similar to how Bayonetta does it. Is this design appropriate for a children's game? I'd say so. She just exists like this and isn't trying to do anything inherently provocative in her actions. Maybe it's different for me as a man who isn't attracted to women in that way, but I don't think she's so provocative that it's a problem for a child to look at her. I usually only ever start to have an issue when they're wearing a mini skirt that covers almost nothing. I just think the chests of men and women aren't as sexual as others. Now, do I have any issue with them changing her design? No, I don't care if they cover her up. As long as the core of her design, which is a mature femme fatale with a love for gems, isn't changed, I don't care. I want her to remain strong, capable, and maintain her flaw of greed. I especially like how she acted as a mediator for Omega and Shadow in Sonic Heroes, and how she remains close allies with the both of them going forward. Their dynamic is fantastic, and what she wears doesn't really affect that too much. As long as she is in any kind of bodysuit, someone will find issue with it, so we're always going to have someone complaining about it. If she undergoes a drastic change, we'll have people complaining about what we lost, so someone will always be unhappy. Just don't change her character, and I'll be happy. We cut straight into Sand Ocean without any fanfare, and listen to Eggman here.
Those idiots will never find my hidden base inside this pyramid.
Did he forget he flew off straight towards it when both Knuckles and Rouge were looking at him? Gun robots already seem to be checking the area for him, so they already appear to have some general idea of the whereabouts of his base. Both Tails and Eggman come through this desert area, but they definitely don't have the connection Knuckles and Rouge's do. Sure, this is a great level, and from what I've played, Eggman's levels seem to be more consistently challenging and fun than Tails' levels. There's more things to shoot at, and the level design just hits better. This place also looks real cool at night, gotta say. The fire illuminating some portions, paired with the music, gives this stage a very chill, yet still sinister vibe. Jumping between the moving platforms without the hover is nerve-wracking, and the abundance of destruction Eggman does while navigating his way through Sand Ocean seems to be his theme. I'm going to be paying close attention to see if all of his stages are more destructive than Tails' are. If so, that's another subtle theming that you can only really come to appreciate once you see it for the first time. On a side note, reviewing this game has highlighted more of its flaws, but also more of its strong points. I can see the sort of picture the developers were trying to paint, and while I can see the missteps and the little marks and smudges, I can also see the genuine passion that went into the art behind the game. Die-hard adventure fans probably feel the same way, but without extensively looking at the game like I am now, it's only something they can really feel, not express. Moving on, Eggman enters his base and contemplates the bits and pieces of information Shadow has presented to him. This is interrupted by Eggman turning on the news of all things, which is an odd sense of normalcy that grounds his character. Between evil schemes, he likes to watch the news. How often do you see villains doing something like that? It's a detail that makes him more relatable to you and me. What's unreal is that we get this close-up on what is clearly a character that looks nothing like Sonic, but the news still reports it as such. All they had to do was hide him in shadows or make it so they could only catch glimpses of him to sell the believability of this. We join Shadow at the scene to see what he's up to, and something interesting happens. A flashback begins, and we see one of the lowest, defining moments of his life. I want to talk about this at some length. I'm not an expert or even well researched on the subject, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but Shadow appears to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The sounds of police sirens, and maybe even the gunfire that's been directed his way, has triggered his PTSD, and when it cuts back to him in the midst of the cutscene, we see him with his eyes closed and distressed. Would it be all too wrong to say that Shadow is having a panic attack here? He may act all tough and edgy on the surface, but he's someone who lost his older sister figure unjustly without any chance to say goodbye. He's less edgy and more so accurate to call jaded. He's in the midst of suffering from his PTSD. If you have someone in your life who suffers from PTSD, or you suffer from some form of it yourself, you know how debilitating it can be. Sometimes, it even causes the person in question to become destructive to themselves or others. Shadow may be a fictional character, but the love for him starts here. Seeing a character that is struggling so deeply with the pain all of us will know too well one day. The pain of loss. Of course he's angry at the world. It took away something so dear to him. The one person he could say that really cared about him in the end. We don't linger on his flashback for too long, because the level starts after we barely even get to process what happened. Since the game will move on without me otherwise, let's leave a pin in his mental health struggles for now. Shadow's gameplay is just like Sonic's, and the two operate almost the same. The bounce bracelet is the only major deviation the two have moveset wise, and if you've played this game plenty, you know it actually is quite a big deal, even if only a single power up. The scenery of this level is shared with Tails' Mission Street, but it's a much faster level without any of the city sections. Something of note, when you're not too far into this level, I noticed the signs above say Freedom, Miles, and Amigo left lane. Considering Shadow's not in the best headspace, these could be reflections of what he's feeling. In particular, Amigo left lane could be interpreted as your amigo has left or your friend is gone. People sometimes say they've left this world instead of saying someone passed, because those words may hurt more. Another way to look at it is, if you look at the level, the road ahead actually ends, perhaps saying, there is no road that leads to your friend or freedom. Am I reading into this too much? Maybe. You're here for stuff like this though, so those two road signs are important. My gameplay will admit something to you here. The fact I am collecting this on my second playthrough says something, doesn't it? The way I'm collecting it shows I actually did not collect the Lightspeed Dash in my first playthrough. Somehow, I completely forgot about it. This jump is easy enough to make even on your first playthrough if it isn't obvious. So while this isn't the dev's intended way of getting this, it's how I'm getting it. Look, it's not my fault his power-ups are more hidden than most other characters are. Ha ha, no shortcuts here I guess. This loop wants you to experience its angles and cinematography. This is what I mean about these pipes sticking out in random places. It's worse when you see them out in space, but this itself is already pretty ridiculous. Also, the borders of the road, the signs, and even the blimp above want you moving forward. They want you going fast. Who am I to deny the speed the game wants from me? Thematically, both Sonic and Shadow are escaping in their first stage in the story before they've even met. Another parallel to add to the pile. Unrelated, but biggest here on this blimp in this level. I'm not kidding when I say he's hiding somewhere in every level. The coolest part of this stage has to be this bridge portion. Unless you're me and miss the opportunity to rail grind along it. Look at this pathetic way I get up. Maybe in this case, it's not about the journey, but instead, the destination. What a destination it is. This is maximum cool finding out you can even ride along this here. And I love understated level design. Sure, it would make sense you can ride along this one after the intro, but since the game doesn't really direct you towards it, you might assume it's like any other less cool game that doesn't let you do cool things all the time. This trick ramp in the tunnel is oddly placed. You get the smallest flip out of it that barely does anything for you, and at that point, it's like Shadow's going out of his way to look cool while escaping the police. As a first level introducing the gameplay style, this would be incredibly difficult compared to Sonic. There's bottomless pits everywhere, and the game is placing challenges in front of you that any new player would be biting their nails over. Tell me, did anyone actually play the Dark Story first as a kid? What was that experience like? We end things off with another spiral, and Shadow's first stage in the Sonic series is complete. It's an amazing showing, having a more consistent tension around it just because of the story and danger present. I'd say it's as good as City Escape, attaining a similar exciting flow all throughout, with constant prompting to look cool while tackling the stage. Did you know Chow apparently weren't able to feed themselves in the Dreamcast original of Sonic Adventure 1? Yeah, if you didn't feed them, they would have a tantrum on the ground. I'm glad small features like this exist, because not only is it quality of life, but watching the Chow go feed itself for the first time brings them to life in your head even more. Shadow's villainous monologuing makes some more sense when you realize the plan he's putting together. With how Shadow turns his head, he doesn't even seem like he was aware of Sonic's presence until he looked down. He's so out of it that he's not even perceiving the people around him at times. Not only that, but when he's drawn out of it, he's immediately being threatened by this hedgehog he knows nothing about. Sonic calls him a fake, and with the context of the identity issues Shadow has in his own game, this likely only exacerbated his stress and anger. Sonic has every right to be mad, but so does Shadow. They've both been wronged, albeit Shadow a bit more than Sonic. Their conflict was inevitable the second Shadow took the emerald, and neither of them even knew it. Rouge's POV takes us over to the egg quarter, and we get a brief cutscene to start us off. Rouge seems to be leaving a message for someone, and is intent on invading Eggman's base. Instead of mostly hunting for emeralds like Knuckles' playthrough, we need to find keys to get through this area. Egg Quarter has one clear defining feature that makes it different than Knuckles' own similar level, and it's not half as good as Dry Lagoon and Wild Canyon were. The main culprit? This beetle flying around. If you get too close to it, you take damage. While not a huge issue at first, the design of this level forces you to interact with it extensively. As a kid, I never really paid attention to what Omochao said, so seeing this animation of Rouge hiding in the shadows is unironically new for me. This is pretty cool at first, and fits in with the whole espionage theme of this level. However, remember what I said about levels getting lengthy? This stage is not very large, and doesn't interconnect the same way Death Chamber does. You were repeatedly put in the path of this machine, of course, but considering the connecting hallways have no way for you to get around the bot with some speed, a lot of waiting is involved. This doesn't make this level the worst of them all, nor is it even that bad, but it does bring the level down considerably. Death Chamber is a direct comparison that paints this level in a worse light yet, but Egg Quarter is a fine enough stage at the end of the day. If this stage had more connecting hallways where you could avoid the beetle altogether, or getting seen didn't guarantee taking a hit, it'd be a whole lot better. Actually, if you could dodge whatever attack the beetle sent your way, it'd have probably made this level more fun instead. Also, here's Big the Cat on this level. I'm a fan of the whole parallels theming, but Egg Quarter is way too similar to Death Chamber. It's not inoffensive, but certainly below middle of the pack. Omochao, watch out! I had to replay a lot of levels when I came to them in the script. All the alternate characters and costumes show footage from separate recordings I did for a refresher. Some of these levels needed a second, more thorough exploration than I just did to fully form my thoughts on. My first time through Egg Quarter, I barely had any issue and didn't even interact with the level's details. I sort of autopiloted through it like I always had, ignoring the gimmick almost entirely. By the time this whole video was finished, I probably have invested over 100 hours in its formation. And upon recording this, I know it's definitely getting closer to the 150 range. Recording the game, writing the script, recording voiceover for the script, editing the video together, making a thumbnail, it's a lot. If you've made it this far and still haven't subscribed, would you? I'm hoping to make YouTube into a career, and it's rough for small channels to get started and actually seen. I won't yap on and on about it in the middle of your video though. So let's continue. Rouge starts collecting information for her mysterious entity she's assisting, mentioning it's her mission. The game hasn't directly said who she's working for up until this point, so I'm working with the information we're given. Nothing else new is given to us, and we jump to Eggman's POV in Lost Colony. Once again, Eggman is in a level that is cloaked in darkness. That seems to be another running theme too. The Ark isn't powered on here, and there's a nifty detail between the wall pieces in the beginning. Instead of the flowing green, they're a stagnant red, and we can see it glowing well into the darkness once we enter the doors before us. The music is mysterious sounding, and together with the environment, they set the perfect vibe of curious unease and maybe even a bit of fear. This is top-notch atmosphere building, made even better by playing the hero story first and noticing these extra details. Did you notice the Chaos Drives actually illuminate the area around them? I love this game, man. Based on the expertly crafted atmosphere alone, I can give this level a pass on just being fine gameplay wise. It's very basic mecha gameplay in a confined area, and it's not much different than Tales' Eternal Engine besides the visuals and difficulty. You can't get sucked out into space, thankfully, and there are a few different rooms with different navigation between. At the end of the day though, it's a parallel to a level I already didn't like that much. I actually believe I enjoy Lost Colony more, simply because there's no instant death from shooting the wrong thing at the wrong time. This room uses the darkness in such an intimidating manner. Yeah, I definitely like this level more than Eternal Engine. So much is added by the arc being quote-unquote offline. I also believe Eggman gets more sections where it challenges you to get the highest combo possible. This is the most fun one gets to, oh, hi Big, why are you here? Anyway, ranking up high combos with tons of enemies is the most fun this gameplay style can provide. So Eggman having, on average, more enemies than Tails makes his levels a whole ton more fun. I never thought I'd be saying Eggman's levels are more fun, but now that I've played and am rewatching the footage, this is more fun. Wow, I really was ambivalent to a lot of the Tails levels I'm realizing now. They weren't bad, but they left me without too strong of opinions. Even if these levels might be better paced, I miss the movement of Gamma's levels so much. Shadow's been waiting for us, and he unveils what this provided wish of his entails.
The glorious achievement of what the world's leading scientist, Professor Gerald, has created. The Ark was the first space colony created by mankind. Not many people know that the Ark contained a top-secret research facility where weapons of mass destruction were being created. This is one of them, a weapon capable of destroying an entire planet, codenamed the Eclipse Cannon.
Destroying an entire planet? Was this my grandfather's legacy?
But it's been deactivated for some time now. To reactivate it, large amounts of energy are necessary.
Oh, so that's why we needed the Chaos Emerald.
Exactly. To reactivate the machine, we need the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Once you have that, then you have the ultimate power of destruction to use as you please. And then, the world could be yours.
It's very clear how Shadow is manipulating Eggman into causing the world's destruction here. For a genius, Shadow plays Eggman like a fiddle. The Dark Stories characters are all backstabbing one another and have their own plans, huh? That's when Rouge intrudes and their unsteady alliance forms. These cutscenes definitely need some audio work, jeez.
May not look like it, but do you know that I am a treasure hunter that specializes in all kinds of jewels?
Very well.
Now the group is at Prison Island to steal some emeralds from right under the government's nose, and they formulate their plan of attack. It's not too complex. Eggman creates a distraction, Shadow plants the bomb, and Rouge sneaks out with the emeralds. For some reason, we get yet another Eggman level back to back. Shadow only gets 4 stages out of the total 14, and it's a huge shame we get so little of him overall. I'm not saying that Eggman getting so much attention is necessarily a bad thing, but making us wait 4 full stages before getting to play him again is certainly an odd pacing choice. Sonic sometimes got 2 stages in a row, and if you aren't a fan of the mech stages, treasure hunting stages, or both, the Dark Story has very little to offer you. This early area gives us access to one of the largest combos in the game, but also highlights how the aiming reticle can be a bit finicky. Trying to lock on to so many grouped targets isn't its strong suit, and the way I flail around shows that. Also, appropriately so, Eggman's back to his theme of having very destructive levels. Lost Colony had a break from the destruction, but he's right back to it. Actually, thinking back, he was still destroying plenty while going through there. All his other levels are just so much more destructive overall though. Big's up top here just chilling. Once again, he is somewhere he should not be. Compared to Sonic's run through, you can see, oh, that's sad. I just fell in. Sonic's Metal Harbor is way more diverse with all of the different routes to take. You can see the huge difference in design philosophy. And to me, the leading cause why some mech stages are so meh. I'm not asking for crazy diverging paths, but having little side paths that offer more risk for higher reward or goodies make these levels much more replayable. When you go through this level as an example, it's always the same way forward with next to no deviations. Replays don't even give you the chance to change things up more than getting a better score here. Go on to ship, go right onto some scaffoldings. Do this 3 times and level's done. It is clear as day to me that these levels didn't get the same time and care as the others, but especially the way we waltz up to the goal ring with zero fanfare. This is such a wild cutscene. Amy, blindly hugs Shadow from behind, mistaking him for Sonic. You know what? I'll let it explain itself.
Oh, Sonic! I thought I'd never see you again. I'm so glad you made it. You're not Sonic. Who are you?
I'm the one who should be asking that.
Dr. Eggman! Ah!
Amy, kindly. Leave it to me. I'll take care of her. You too.
Nice tan line and forehead that looks like a butt cheek, Eggman. The cutscene before feels beyond contrived, having almost zero reasonable explanation for happening. The whole everyone mistakes Shadow for Sonic thing is getting harder and harder to maintain your suspension of disbelief for when it's so obvious to the viewer it's not Sonic.
Eggman, you won't get away with this.
You have to kill that 80-year-old.
Oh my god!
Woohoo, Tails fight. This fight is identical AI-wise, so fighting Tails here is the same as fighting Eggman in Tails' story. No after fight cutscene, we just shoot straight back over to Rouge's POV. This all feels weirdly paced, if only because the stage card drops before we get the rest of the context. Imagine if the title card dropped after their brief chat, or even better, dropped when gameplay started as a cool design that slides across the screen. I'm going to try to illustrate what that would look like real quick.
5 minutes should be plenty. Here I go.
I'm sure quite a few people cursed Rouge here for disregarding Eggman's generous 15 minutes for a measly 5. It adds a lot of tension to the level, and I imagine most first-time players cut it close or even failed a few times. This level is box-shaped, so there's just as much vertical ground as there is horizontal to traverse. There are lasers all over, and you really get the feeling that you're a spy infiltrating the enemy's base. 10 out of 10 in terms of the delivery of the theming. I'm a failure. Eggman nagging you every minute just heightens the tension. It's the little additional touches that make it all come together.
Hurry up, Rouge. The island is set to blow up.
This upper area you can come to has so many lasers, it's straight out of a spy flick. Watch me struggle even more. Sheesh. Okay, 1 emerald to go, 2 minutes remaining, and Eggman won't get off our backs.
What in the world are you doing? You took longer than you were supposed to.
Could you even imagine this level without the timer? I can't. Its small size is perfect for not spending too long looking for a blip on the radar, which is more than can be said for some other stages. Eggman's badgering gets even worse at 1 minute remaining.
Rouge, it's going to explode. Hurry up. Get going.
All that, only for the emerald to be floating right there, not locked up in the slightest. Do the emeralds have minds of their own or something? After that nail-biting level, we come face to face with a familiar foe, minus the legs. This fight is not notably different, minus making some leg puns and the walls on the sides you can climb up. What's more important is what comes after. Let's jump ahead. Shadow, hearing Rouge over their comms device that she's trapped with no means of escape, has yet another traumatic flashback to Maria's last moments, and it spurs him into action to save her. I'm also a big fan of this portrayal, because PTSD likely has a negative connotation behind it for a lot of people. Just because you suffer from a big, bad, scary mental illness, it doesn't make you a bad person that exclusively does bad things. Many people don't even believe in mental health, but here we are, 20 plus years ago, getting representation through Shadow. His great character makes it all the worse when other interpretations of him don't entirely understand his legacy. He's not just an edgy dude, he is so much more than that. White Jungle isn't all that different from Green Forest. We get some rain? The level itself makes much more use of these pulley vines rather than the swinging around ones. It's definitely a much more dour and depressing level to go through, lacking Green Forest's intense, heart-pounding track that pushes you to go as fast as possible. No, instead, Shadow's theme has something much different, which fits his stage, character, and current story a whole lot better. Let's listen to the lyrics in 2 specific places. Now, what Shadow is afraid of, in my mind, could be multiple things. He could be afraid that he's not going to be there in time to rescue Rouge. On the flip side, he could also be afraid of if what he's doing is the right thing. He's running into danger to save someone else, naturally, but there's another layer to this song I want to highlight now. Clearly, some internal dialogue is happening here between Shadow and someone else. The other voice in the song is the one that also asks Shadow if he's scared of something. This could be as simple as a back and forth happening within two halves of himself. One wants to help, the other doesn't. Alternatively, one could be Maria's voice. I'm not saying it's literally Maria speaking to him, but more so him thinking about what she would say here. If you haven't lost anyone in your life that has had a major impact on you, you may not entirely understand the feeling. Hell, you could even lose a pet and have this feeling. If you have, I'm certain there's been a time where you've sat there and thought, what would they think? What would they say? What would they do? And you recreate how you remember them in your head. You imagine their words, guidance, advice, happiness, sadness, anger, everything. And in a sense, part of them lives on inside of you. That's what I mean by saying this could be Maria speaking to him. They're having an internal discourse of some kind. And personally, I lean towards that being what's going on. Excellent storytelling, and all of it is tucked into the lyrics of the song that you probably don't even pay that close attention to. The words themselves are hard to make out while you're going through the level, so I wouldn't be surprised if most people didn't really get the full idea of what the song's trying to say. In terms of the level itself, it hasn't done anything too spectacular here. It feels like an Act 2 of Green Forest, which is probably what they're going for. There is more of a focus on these grapples that whip you around, but this is definitely Green Forest again. There's nothing wrong with that, because this level is good. The music definitely carries though. See, I wasn't lying earlier. I somehow entirely missed the Lightspeed dash on my first playthrough. If we bring up my bit crushed footage, we can see that I circumvented it. I don't know how I did this without thinking, oh wait, I missed Shadow's power-up, but I did. If you watched my Sonic Adventure 1 video, I did mention being high for some of the recordings. That's the only reason I could think of for genuinely missing it. Big the Cat is just hanging around right here, around the end of the level if you were curious. Overall, a great Act 2 to Green Forest, and the lyrics to the song, upon listening to them closely, brought me a new and enhanced appreciation for the level, and Shadow. Personally, I was never able to make out the song beyond the oh yeah, but I would always hum the lyrics to myself when playing the level. Unrelated, but I love how the child just plopped down to sleep. I wish it were that easy. If you spent any amount of time in the Chow Garden, I know you also had a moment where you just spasm out on the mountains for the hell of it. Everyone's waited around for their child to wake up when they need to give them animals, and what else is there to do but do weird shit around the garden? Also, another weird quirk of this game, but did you see how I moved the fruit with the camera? I didn't even register it at the time when playing, but what is that about? I guess the camera getting stuck in walls sometimes makes sense now, because it's clearly a physical object that interacts with the world. If anyone has more insight on how the camera exactly works, I'd love to hear about it. Once again, we come to the Sonic and Shadow fight. With all the context of everything I previously said, Sonic provoking Shadow into a confrontation is 100% expected. There's even more to this that we only hear about later in the story involving Shadow's identity and memories, but Faker, it hits him right in a tender weak spot. If you stop to watch Sonic attempt to fight you like I have, the AI really does itself no favors. Big is even present in this fight down here, by the way. I don't know what you're doing down there, buddy, but you better get out of this island quick. With him defeated, we see where Shadow runs off to after his confrontation with Sonic. He goes to save Rouge just in the nick of time, a mere second before the bomb explodes with Chaos Control. If you needed any more convincing about my previous point made about his internal dialogue with Maria, this cutscene has him recalling a moment with her. I'll let Shadow explain his confusion for himself.
The professor said his life's work was dedicated to all of those who live down there. He once told that the reason for his existence was making people happy through the power of science.
Shadow.
Maria, I just don't know anything anymore. I often wonder why I was created, what my purpose is for being here. Maybe if I go down there, I will find the answers. Maybe. Maria.
Why so melancholy?
Damn, Rouge. Then she starts grilling him even more.
That was so unexpected. So unlike you, Shadow, to come and rescue me.
Of course he claps back and says he wasn't even saving her afterwards.
We only have 6 of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, you know.
That's more than enough for the demonstration. So let's get the show on the road.
Ooh, he's extra spicy in his delivery there. Rouge really got under his skin with her comments. Or maybe he's getting impatient. Perhaps both. This cutscene is a repeat without any change. No need to go over it again for any reason in particular.
Why are you so upset? Well, that was really impressive. You've managed to create complete havoc on the whole planet. Does this now mean we control the planet and can do as we choose?
Rouge's delivery of her lines here is weird. I'm pretty sure she's mocking Eggman's plan, and her comment about throwing a tantrum is evidence more towards this idea.
Where in the world have you been?
Something happened?
Our threats fell on deaf ears.
Look at you, throwing a tantrum like a little kid.
It's so odd to hear a Sonic game recognize its previous entry.
Station Square saved from a life-threatening missile attack.
We're really missing out on this in the modern-day Sonic titles, aren't we? Rouge makes her true allegiance even clearer. Why am I saying it like that? Rouge makes her true allegiance even clearer here. If you put 2 and 2 together from the hero story, you'd probably guess she's the government agent. But even if you don't recall that, whomever wants this information has to be of high importance. Sorry, my mistake. Her true allegiance is Jules. The only thing of particular note going on in this driving section is that it's generally harder due to some gaps where you can actually fall off. Other than that, we're driving in her snazzy Batmobile, so that's cool. Did you know they never tell you how to drift in these stages? The unintuitive double tapping to drift doesn't help with discovering it on your own. Let's just jump to the end. You can only watch me run so many families off the road before it stops being funny. Shadow pursuing the heroes doesn't really come to mean anything in the story, does it? Hard to complain since we're getting another Shadow level, but the story is mostly waiting for the hero characters to get to Eggman's pyramid for the story to continue onwards. What do people think of less spooky Pumpkin Hill? Skyrail's primary design feature is its rails in the sky. The other main obstacle are these springs with fans. Homing attacking them repeatedly makes them rise, and they punish if you just try to mash it. There's a sneaky side path right at the beginning you'll likely spot if you go for the Chow Crate. Following it leads us to a power-up, the Ancient Light. Remember it? Well, the first and only time I use it, it does this. Look familiar?
Time to play games.
What the fuck?
Please.
What the fuck?
My thoughts exactly, mysterious friend watching me play through the game. Haha, gotcha. I would never fall off. I end up going along the rail backwards the entire way. That's a pretty cool tech, right? Wrong. My controls were reversed because of it. Sonic Adventure 2 game jank at its finest. I love it. Something I noticed about this level in particular, but generally the whole game as well, is that I'm bad at it, is that there's not as much traversable ground as other games in the Sonic series. You're frequently above death pits or on a very small pathway. This game feels so much more dangerous than I remember it. It's shit like this that made Sega overcorrect and add a whole reticle for the homing attack. I prefer the freedom. Maybe I shouldn't be given any freedom, actually. I really have no excuse for any of this. Take my gamer license if you must. Even in my alternate footage, I fell over 3 times. I don't even blame the level for it. I was messing around and I got the consequences for my actions. Okay, no idea what happened to my jump here. Is this my fault? I really can't tell. Oh my god. I'm going to cry. Please. I promise I've been playing video games for 2 decades and I don't suck at them. Oh, please tell me I didn't miss. Phew, no sweat. I promise this is a really fun, tense level when you get practiced at it. I fully understand if some of the jank anyone witnessed right now might be frustrating to experience. Modern Sonic is tons more streamlined, but if you do think that way, hear me out. Something's lost when you bowl with the rails up. Sonic Adventure is like bowling without the rails. Ooh. people even still go bowling? Maybe the Chow Garden in its next iteration should add Chow Bowling. The Chow behaviors are genuinely adorable. So much love was put into the Chow, and seeing this in front of me makes me think, for the millionth time, what a modern day budget and tools could deliver to us. Would they create something even better, or would they miss this original magic and give us a hollow recreation of what we once loved? I don't know anymore. By the way, the Dark Chow I later named Bingo. Oops. Chapan and Bingo. Could you imagine if they remade Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 with online play? You could do online races in karate with your Chow. It wouldn't be all that competitive, but a fun way for fellow Chow enjoyers to just interact with one another. A man can dream. Shadow has a pointless cutscene where he lets the doctor know the heroes are on their way. We then jump forward after their infiltration, and a familiar cutscene plays out. It actually has some change though. Because of how cheesy good it is, I'll let it play itself. Sonic has no pupils right there. I have no idea why they make us refight Egg Golem for any other reason than padding time. Why doesn't Eggman just return the way he came? Why does a rocket take off to the Ark that Sonic and friends hitch a ride on? Eggman, Shadow, and Rouge can teleport to and from there. It was shown earlier. It's starting to feel like they didn't know what to do with this part of the dark story, so they cobbled together something to fill the dead air. They have plenty of game here, so I don't understand why Eggman needed to fight the Egg Golem again. This boss doesn't even meaningfully test your abilities. Spamming shots towards the boss isn't challenging, and it's easy enough to face tank everything like I did here. Maybe they should have made it so you actually needed to target multiple parts at the same time to damage the boss's health bar, but even that wouldn't be too challenging. I'm not particularly interested in brainstorming an alternative to this boss. I'd rather advocate for axing it from the dark story altogether. Let's move on to more interesting story beats ahead. Now things are getting interesting. Rouge plays her hand and begins gathering the information she was sent here to grab. I too put top secret and super confidential all over my documents I want no one to see. However, they delay any major gratification by having Rouge run off for the Master Emerald pieces that just so happen to be dumped all over space. I get she's greedy, and having flaws is okay, but come on. One could argue that she's getting her hands on the pieces to prevent Eggman from getting a hold of them. I'd actually like if she was playing the bad guy to Knuckles as well, and acted like she wanted to steal when, actually, she always intended to return them to him. You know, prevent Eggman from getting his hands on it. It just seems too far of a stretch for her to be that negligent. But maybe Batgirl here sees green and her eyes glaze over. Who knows? Minor grievances aside, we are at the notorious Mad Space now. Imagine Knuckles' final level, but more horizontally spread out, and we get Mad Space. Even without the frustrating gravity mechanics, I'm sure this level would be disliked simply because of how distantly placed everything is. Flying through space is super cool and all, don't get me wrong, but how they went about achieving that fantasy here led to a compromise of gameplay enjoyment. Flying through this level definitely feels like I am in space, and the dizzying gravity is maddening, but not in the way you want a player to feel. More experienced players will recommend newer ones read the hints and not worry about your score on the first way through. I've already discussed how the information given by the monitors leaves you wandering aimlessly if you do not know what they're talking about. Here, they're intentionally obtuse, which only compounds the frustration if you're particularly reliant on them. Look at how spaced out these individual platforms are. Emeralds may or may not actually spawn there, but to the perspective of a casual or inexperienced player, each of these spots potentially could be a place they spawn. Call it Schrodinger's Mad Space. Everywhere could have the emerald, and you won't know until you've played it multiple times. I'm an experienced player too, having played this game plenty in my youth. Even if I have to warm up to the game first to get back to my old skill, you develop an intuition of how the game plays ball. Even with that natural advantage, I am still unable to do this level in a timely fashion. This will be the last time I have to say this for a level, but it is only made worse by being able to only track one emerald at a time. You know what? I just had a great idea for a new version of the hint system. What if we got rid of the hint monitors and instead they were power-ups around the map you could grab. They would be much more plentiful and less hidden than emerald pieces, but they shouldn't be right out in the open, easy to grab. These power-ups would act as ammo for a tool of yours, and with it, you could get a general direction to go in, like Tikal would in Sonic Adventure 1. Tikal's hints were way too easy, so giving a challenge behind achieving a hint would fix the problem with it being effortless. Maybe you don't even need power-ups. You could lock it behind a ring requirement. Every 20 rings you collect, you can get a general direction for where the emerald piece is. I would say it shouldn't consume the rings, because if you do that, people will have the same issue again of not wanting to use it. Have a ring energy meter, and then the hint system would expend said ring energy. Do you think my proposed system would make treasure hunting a more fun gameplay style? You would initially go around the map looking for big bunches of rings as well as emerald radar blips, and then when you collect enough, the secondary objective helps push you towards your primary objective. Making the hint system use ring energy that only fills by collecting rings means you would always have something to do while roaming around. I just spitballed the first idea that came to mind because there's not too much more to say about Rouge's stage. I identified the flaws, the great parts, and that's really it. As a whole, the treasure hunting system in SA2 is good, but not great. Their lack of direction provided and getting lost for too long isn't fixed by the hint monitor system due to how it is designed. On small maps, the lack of direction isn't an issue because the emerald radar does its job. However, on larger maps, the game leans more on the hint system, which isn't good enough for a first-time player. This gameplay style could be perfected by making the tracking of emerald pieces consistently give you an idea of the general area you need to go, and I genuinely think my proposed idea for a hint system would solve it, or at least be better. The hint system in SA2 is great for replays, because the hints mean something to the experienced player, but for a new player, definitely not. Look at that, nearly 8 minutes, easily could be 30 if it was 10-year-old me playing, and it felt like 30 minutes going through it. Great idea, messy execution. To follow that frustrating stage with this fight really doesn't help the low point of the dark story. My issues with this fight are the same, and with this fight, I spend significantly longer struggling to track Knuckles down and bop him. The issue with the opposing characters spamming their ranged attack is that, in order to dodge it, you need to be moving quickly, which constitutes gliding in this area. With so little room to breathe, you have to cease your searching for Knuckles or Rouge to avoid getting hit. Let's count how many times Knuckles casts his attack on me.
Now witness my power. Take this! Now witness my power. Take this! Power. Take this! Power. Take this! Power. Take this! Take this! Take this! Take this!
Get your ass back here!
They should have doubled the time between casts at least. This cutscene hasn't changed at all, so I guess I can point out this. Rouge had to be saved twice in this game. She's as much a damsel in distress as Amy is if you count the amount of times they were in peril and needed rescuing. We hardly view her as one, because she is a character with autonomy and is meaningfully making her own decisions that are moving her plot along. But, technically, they both had to be saved twice. No way they could have intended both female characters to be both in peril twice on both sides. That's crazy if they intended to mirror that for both sides. Nah, they couldn't have, right? This really puts into perspective how on top of things Eggman was in that scene, and how Tails' slip-up didn't entirely doom Sonic to a spaceflight. Tails is incredibly intelligent in his own right, but Eggman is smarter.
Now is the time to end this long drawn battle. Place in history as the ultimate genius.
The ultimate genius. 2 ultimate life forms, and now an ultimate genius? What is this, Danganronpa? Cosmic Wall's existence confounds me a bit. Was Eggman not on the Ark this entire time? What was he waiting for? Why did he stay down at the pyramid while Sonic and company went up? Was he too busy dealing with the egg golem? It seems unacceptably neglectful on his part. Oh well. At least Cosmic Wall shows us some of the best gameplay mech stages have to offer. The focus on verticality and the on-rails sections in this level alleviate the clunky control of the mech, allowing you to focus on what's fun. There are so many things for you to aim at that you'll be scoring high combo after high combo. That's when mech gameplay is at its best, and I genuinely think it has potential to continue on after this game too. Seriously, I think the mech gameplay style would work if we could move around with Sonic and Shadow's physics, give Tails a Mega Man-esque arm, and see how that plays. There's not too much in particular to say about this level. I could point out the spread of enemies here or there, but the level design is mostly floating in platforms in the midst of space. One way forward, shoot the enemies in your way. The low point of this level has to be this ascent. There are next to no enemies in these areas, minus the grapple hooks that yank you up. And with how mechs are, movement-focused gameplay is significantly less fun. Dropping down is a different story. Halting your fall with the hover to quickly lock onto more bots, then drop further down the shaft to squeeze more in the combo is great fun. A highlight, as mentioned before, are these on-rail sections. You usually control the flow of enemies before you, but the game is dictating that for you now. It's crazy. Who would have thought taking away the player's control would lead to having more fun? In platformers, auto-scroller levels tend to be disliked, but they've managed to make it work here. Overall, this level is an awesome, destructive finale of Eggman's stages. He definitely wrecks things in his path more than Tails, whose own Eternal engine actually encouraged you to pick your shots more carefully. The movement of the mechs hold it back, and while we will likely never see it again in a form close to this, it's not so bad. Huge faults, but it is acceptable gameplay. You know, looking at games from a game design perspective, and especially developer intent, makes everything so much more complex. We look at this end part of the level where we need to destroy the drills, and you can tell this unusual set piece is signposting we're drawing to an end with a final climax. Not all the levels have a concrete ending, but the ones that do deserve praise for their turning levels into storybooks. Storybooks with an identifiable beginning, middle, and end.
Darn! Why do they always leave a sweet little innocent girl like me alone?
Well, young lady. Is there something I can help you with?
Mr. Eggman!
It's like she's a part of a play and making a meta acknowledgement to the audience. The pacing of this cutscene is odd. In the hero story, Sonic has to go through a whole level to get here, but on Dark Story side, it's one cut and he's magically here. Other than that, this cutscene is identical, and the fight afterwards greets us with Tails' voice acting.
What have you done to Sonic? I'll never forgive you for this.
This fight is the same, but slightly easier on Eggman's side due to the health upgrade you can grab. If there is some strategy to this that doesn't involve spamming once they start firing off their lasers, please let me know. Nothing new to add otherwise. Onwards.
I guess he was just a regular hedgehog after all.
Damn, Shadow, that's cold. Rouge makes her move to take the emeralds, but Shadow catches her in the act. He calls her out to be what we all assumed, a government spy. Rouge, however, rolls with the punches, barely phased and continuing her banter with Shadow. In fact, Rouge's got some things to say.
So you did your homework, is that it? I would say that's an invasion of privacy.
I could say the same thing about you.
It looks like things aren't quite going your way, but since my job is done, I thought it was time to take what's mine and get out of this place.
You are one pathetic creature.
Look who's talking. What about you? Here are the results of the research project called the Ultimate Life Form.
She does not hesitate to turn up the heat on Shadow. She pulls out one document and plants seeds of doubt in his head. I feel as if some part of Rouge actually cares to help Shadow set the record straight, and Shadow's upward inflection also shows uncertain vulnerability.
If you want to live, leave the Chaos Emeralds where they are. The fake emerald is good enough for you.
Do you actually believe that you're the real Shadow?
No
Even
doubt.
your memories might not be real, you know?
Even if my memories are not real, it's still me, Shadow.
It's some of the best dialogue delivery the game's got, in terms of conveying the emotion it's intending anyway. Here we are. Final Chase, the counterpart to Sonic's final level. Unfortunately, this stage's gimmick drags it down. What's worse is that the gimmick is ever present all throughout, dictating a great chunk of the platforming available. Crazy Gadget played with the gravity and it worked out good, but here they have you rotate around these green tubes. They frequently don't act the way you expect, and if Rouge's Mad Space showed us anything about green phallic objects, it's that they don't work right. Right when I go to grab the Mystic Melody on this stage, Shadow spasms off the top of the tube back down onto its side. You can't see it as often as I felt it, but it genuinely feels like wrestling against the game's controls. The movement doesn't become comfortable because of its inconsistency. As in Act 2 to Sonic's level, it still has the fun elements of rails and the tension of being up in outer space, but it is objectively worse than Sonic's stage. The cylinders aren't always the most difficult to navigate over, but they never feel great to interact with. Worse yet, the level makes you interact with them, and you can't even take an alternate path to avoid them. Look at what happens when I go for this ring box. I wig out so hard, and I didn't intend for anything that happened after my jump. Ugh, why did my inflection go to that one cringe Deku voice? Daddy isn't done speaking. I probably shouldn't have put that one out on the internet. Later, one jump sends me off the edge despite locking onto the gravity of the pillar. Have this happen 3 or 4 times, and any chance of having fun is out the window. It's a sad way to end the Dark story, and an even sadder way to send off the Sonic and Shadow action stages. It's a sour note for sure, and while the last story is still a part of the picture, this is the last dedicated stage to the Hedgehogs.
I guess I'm not at full power here.
Imagine if instead Shadow just said, fuck. Exactly how I'd sum things up past me. We've got the same Hedgehog fight, but with the swapped perspectives again. While the fight isn't any different, I can talk over it about my opinion on the Dark story after this playthrough. The first part of the story is enjoyable and flows well, giving us insight to the inciting incident of the story. Shadow and Rouge have gotten great development in their introductory game, making them both compelling and fresh feeling to the series. I'm glad both got to stick around and become mainstays. Eggman remains stagnant as a character, but that's not an issue since we have 2 new ones starring besides him. He'd likely be stealing attention away from them if he did have any significant development. Yeah, he has a few lines near the end of the game that indicate some change in his thinking, but none of that really stuck beyond this game. The sour point is the middle for sure. After White Jungle, the story meanders about waiting for the heroes to get to the Ark, and then both Shadow and Rouge have meh levels. While the story does pick up at the very end, the gameplay available never picks back up beyond a brief stint in Cosmic Wall. It remains average, potentially frustrating, and nothing like a climax should be. We see Eggman had actually gotten a hold of the 7th Emerald, and his maniacal laughter ends off the Dark story on a cliffhanger. Both stories end off in a way that clearly alludes to more, so maybe the hero story and Dark story ending in a way that feels incomplete isn't as much of an issue as I might have thought. Will Sonic Adventure 2 meander its way to the finish, or will it pick up the pace and deliver a proper climax? Well, let's see. Eggman's plans seem to be going haywire once we start the last story. The cannon won't fire, and before he can figure anything out, his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, appears on the monitor before him. We cut over to Sonic and Knuckles being joined by Rouge, but her confident attitude she's held onto for the entire game is gone. She tells us what's happening.
For us.
What do you mean?
I just received a message from my boss. This space colony Ark is currently approaching the Earth at an incredible velocity. It probably will impact Earth.
Rouge's doom posting is interrupted by Gerald Robotnik on yet another screen, and if you pay close attention to the background behind him, that's the same scribbling on the walls that were present in his cell all the way back in Metal Harbor. I think the implication here is that they're executing Gerald Robotnik after this moment.
Is there anything else you want to say? No. Ready!
I guess Eggman did get what he wanted after all. He discovered what his grandfather's work was. Eggman joins the heroes, putting aside their differences and even sharing a bit of back and forth banter like nothing had happened.
You're pretty persistent for a hedgehog, aren't you? You're still alive.
Just letting Knuckles pilot the shuttle on the way over here was more dangerous than you could ever be.
That's cold, Sonic. Eggman brings forth more information. Gerald's diary, perfectly preserved on his handy-dandy disc. No point in talking over our queen. Take it away, Rouge.
I don't quite know what happened or what went wrong. Was it a mistake to create the ultimate life form? I thought it would be something that would benefit mankind, but then the military guards landed on the colony that day, They were sent to destroy the research project that I had been working on. My colleagues at the research facility, my granddaughter, Maria, I hope you are all safe.
Spoiler, they were not.
The colony was completely shut down, probably to keep the prototype from falling into the wrong hands.
The Ark was shut down under the premise that there had been an accident. I found Maria's name among those who died when the Ark was shut down. She meant everything to me, and I couldn't bear the thought that she died because of my research. I lost everything. I had nothing more to live for. I went insane. All I could think about was to avenge her. Somehow, some way. I got scared as I no longer was able to control my thoughts. All I could think about was that I wanted it all to be based on my original projections. I was able to complete my project, Shadow. I designed its mind to be perfect, pure. I will leave everything to him. If you wish, release and awaken it.
If you wish to fill the world with destruction...
As wacky as it is for Gerald to directly state he went insane, we could consider his words a moment of clarity that he jotted down. Not that far-fetched. Eggman further explains how the Ark will explode using the energy of the Chaos Emeralds. Rouge, ever the clever bat, recalls what Knuckles said upon their initial meeting, and they hatch a plan to use the Master Emerald to stop the Ark from its crash course. The Master Emerald being portable and in the plot has justification now. It's a great expected use of it, but it's clear its implementation could have been better. Going baby mode at will isn't the worst thing in the world, but the way Knuckles and Rouge's stories intertwine with their allies do dampen the overall pace of the game negatively. The plan is formulated, and the dialogue here greatly outpaces the animations in the English dub. Everyone putting aside their differences to work together is a climactic game changer used time and time again, and it works wonders here too. We start off as Tails, and despite my sense of urgency, too busy playing with the robot, the game has set the stakes high. Purple Crazy Gadget has more to it than long, uninteresting hallways, because we get introduced to this new gimmick for these levels. These devices stop time. We use it here to stop those angry spinning spike balls, but it gets used in more interesting ways later. Tails' gameplay doesn't introduce anything too crazy here, but I get kidnapped by the game against my will because of a misstep.
Okay.
The next use of the stage's gimmick involves stopping the laser's projection, which is a neat use of it. It's not particularly interesting, but they just introduced it, so we're still building up to more grandiose uses. Now this is getting slightly better. Using it to stop those weights is cool. It still feels like we're warming up to the idea, but I like what they're serving. For a final level, it's been really lax so far. We use it in the final part of Tails' section to stop the platforms and be able to navigate up without issue. Shoot a couple robots, bust down this door, and Tails' section is over. His section serves as a very basic tutorial for what's coming ahead, but I feel like the mechanic they introduced was so simple to understand that it could have afforded to get much harder sooner. Eggman's up next. The 3 shield enemies make it difficult to combo them, and while Tails' section had artificial chaos that you needed to bonk once to make vulnerable, groups of 3 or 4 enemies in a small hallway aren't interesting gameplay for the mechs. 4 of them drop around you in a circle, you blast them without effort, and then we have a vertical shaft that has a decent amount to shoot. I'm not asking to be flooded with enemies, but after seeing the height of the gameplay in Cosmic Wall, this all feels like filler. It's nothing close to the height of action you'd expect to see in the finale. Here we go. This is a rare instance where the platforming for mechs actually challenges you. These blocks can be stopped to ease your forward progression, and you need to use them to avoid dangerous green goopies. I like this fake out they do here. This falling section's lasers are really hard to see for some reason, but I will never not like falling sections taken at your own pace with enemies to combo. I do end up dying here, but this gave me the opportunity to point out that Big the Cat is also here off to the left. He's been such a fun Easter egg all throughout to spot, and while I didn't point out all instances of him, You just love to see it. Easter eggs are all love and care from the devs for the people who pay close attention to the game. In the final room, it's actually a puzzle. You have to stop the time perfectly to position black boxes in such a way where you can use them to jump to the end. There's multiple ways to do this, and I'm a big fan of this freedom. Eggman section is much better, and from here, no more mech gameplay. Hopefully this means the level design opens up, and who am I kidding? Rouge is next, so of course it is. Now we're talking. Look at how much more challenging things get. That oopsie aside, we need to ascend to the top of the room via climbing these segmented pillars. I don't think there has been a challenging gliding and climbing segment in the treasure hunting stages so far. It's usually not much of a puzzle figuring out how to get to a spot you can see. And I realize now that Sonic Adventure 2 treasure hunting left a ton on the table unexplored. I understand platforming challenges are difficult in levels that are so open-ended, but this level shows it is possible to include in some way. After stopping the flow of water in this passageway and heading on through, you come across more green goop and black boxes. To go forward, you need to stop this black box outside of the only passageway forward with the time stop switch. Tragically, I take another fat L from an artificial chaos, and I redo everything to get back to this point with much less issue. Destroy the artificial chaos, and the switch beneath it opens up another switch. We got some Resident Evil progression here. Get a key to enter a room to get another key. It's a simple enough task to throw the switch and fill the room with water, and we transition to Knuckles being in the now flooded area Rouge was once in. Do you see now why I was so hard on Tails and Eggman segment? These two build off of each other's more elaborately designed stages and actually work together within the same area. It really enhances the theme of coming together, and I have to wonder, what if there had been more overlap between all the characters? It's crazy I'm comparing Sonic 06 to this, but Sonic 06 would have characters take over mid-stage to assist with progression with their own unique abilities. Instead of having these mostly disjointed sections, imagine if they all worked together in a larger space to navigate it. I know it was probably super difficult to create this imagined up level of mine, but it would have been more cohesive with the idea that everyone is coming together to save the world. They still do manage it, but the slow start takes quite a bit out of the climax of the game. By the way, this is the part where, if you did not get Knuckles' air necklace, you're in for a rough time. I've never personally played this section without the air necklace, but I've heard from others it is dreadful. There's not enough air bubbles. Simple as that. Imagine if you don't immediately intuit where to go and enter Rouge's section like I did. It punishes exploration and curiosity, which no other treasure hunting stage has done so up until this point. That's not even to mention that you probably don't have much experience with traversing water due to it only being scarcely used throughout the campaign. If you do have the air necklace, this section has the opposite problem of being almost entirely unchallenging. You just swim around, that's all. You do need to stop the flow of time to go beyond some lasers and go down hallways with a flow of water that otherwise pushes you back. It's the classic case of making people use a different control scheme than the one they've played with the entire game in the final hour. Have you ever played a platformer that had a random gunner section at its end? That's what I'm talking about. It gets a bit more challenging when you navigate through this room with the lasers, and the time stop switch is right above the green goop. While it looks dangerous, it really isn't when you play through it. Yeah, I get hit and mess up a few times, but that can be chalked up to unfamiliarity. Why am I having an issue saying that? Unfamiliarity. Oh my god. Unfamiliarity. You know what? I give up. I am unfamiliar with the swimming controls and the push and pull of swimming up and down. You can't just maintain a height. You're either going up or down when in water. All in all, precision swimming is unintuitive and nigh impossible. Paired with the coin flip of Extreme's Challenge or next to none, it's a really meh section on its own, despite being paired well with an earlier Rouge one thematically. All the red fiery decorations of Sonic's section really amps up the intensity and danger of things. Sonic's section has to be the best by far, taking the best gameplay style and pairing it with the most interesting platforming challenges. I sort of let myself fall down from the lack of paying attention, but that's on me for not using my eyes. All the other gameplay styles have come together here, having built up your experience with all the obstacles they throw at you. There's the boxes, lasers, and flowing water impeding your progress. You would think more would come of it, but then you drop into this section where Sonic is swept away by the water's flow, and a familiar tune starts to play. Do you remember these statues from anywhere? What about the design of the area? It's all very, very familiar. I can't quite put my finger on it. Then it ends unceremoniously. All that buildup of having to navigate obstacles they introduced one by one, only to have one section with all of them, and then it ends. I will admit, it's super hyped to be seeing aspects of Sonic Adventure 1 reappearing boldly like this, but this Sonic section ends before it even really starts. I wanted more of his section. What they were going for is the right idea in my mind, but its execution isn't particularly fun or challenging. I only really enjoyed Rouge's section, and it was more okay than truly fun. The formula definitely could have been done better, and it feels bad to be so hard on it, but I did not enjoy playing the stage. If you're not enjoying the game at its end, then it's especially the failing of the game. I don't know about you, but the idea of coming back to the stage to A-rank it is a dreadful slog of an idea. And if you share that sentiment, then maybe you didn't have much fun going through it either. The level felt like it could have benefited from another minute or two of Sonic gameplay, where he would have been navigating all the obstacles introduced up until this point. It's not a final test of everyone's abilities, it just is. Everyone's respective final stages felt like they did more for the characters. Minus Shadow. Speaking of, where's he been at? Oh, we don't get to know, because I grabbed a Chao key and I'm completely cutting the tension of the climax in two with this intermission. This really should have been the one level that didn't have the option for the Chao Garden. The rest of the game benefited from it, but here, it hurts more than helps. You could just not grab the Chao key, but developer intent should have honed in on wrapping up the game here, and giving players the option to pet their Chao before the finale does deflate some of the tension. It's not too big a deal, and I could have walked right back out after going in, but it would have been just as easy to not have Chao boxes in the stage.
I hate it when they leave me behind.
And they did it again. Poor Amy, man. However, she does stumble across Shadow, and I think I want to let this moment play out in full before I talk on it.
Really gotta stop whining. Everyone's trying their best to help out, and so must I. Shadow, we need you. Please help us.
It's all going according to plan. There's no reason for me to help them. Besides, there's no way to save anyone.
There has to be. I know that people fight over the most trivial things. Some people may be selfish, like the professor said. But they're basically good if they try their best and never give up on their wishes. They always have a reason to be happy. That's why you should help them out. Saving them is a good thing. Shadow, I beg you, please do it for them. Give them a chance.
Shadow, I beg of you, please, do it for me. For
Maria!
the future, for all people who live on that planet, give them a chance to be happy. Let them live for their dreams. Shadow, I know you can do it. That's the reason why you were brought into this world. Sayonara, Shadow the
That's what I
Hedgehog.
promised her. And I must keep that promise. That's what
Shadow?
Maria wished for. I've got to go now. I have to keep my promise to Maria and you.
Amy's delivery is rather nonsensical, but I do understand what she was trying to say. Maria in the flashback says what Amy meant to say more eloquently, and Shadow having his memory jogged is a touching moment. He even lets loose a single tear. The intent behind it is an amazing story moment, but its janky delivery from Amy takes away from it. A modern script would do this game's story so so many favors, and I hope we can get it one day. But they're basically good. Almost comes off as dismissive, saying, I know you think all people are bad, but they're not. Huh? That doesn't address the issue at all. I am glad that Amy got to be here and have her moment, though. She's emotionally raw and says what needs to be said for someone hurting like Shadow. Shadow's change of heart is great to see, even if it was confusion of someone's dying wish than actually hating humanity. This thing is like a beating heart, and its shiny, metallic look makes the way it throbs with life unnatural. It makes me uneasy to look at. Professor Gerald's voice emanates from it, and the creature Rouge discovered emerges from it. Shadow walks onto the scene like a badass, and he's the one that chooses to fight this beast known as the Bio-Lizard. The song that plays during this fight, known as Supporting Me, deserves to have its lyrics analyzed closely. The main part of it to focus on first is this main bit, which I will play now. Shadow has chosen to live and is casting aside all of his hatred he had prior. However, he relies on the memory of Maria's light to guide him towards that better future. Breathing in the disgusting air of darkness tells how Gerald implanted his own will of revenge into Shadow by altering his memories, but he will not give in to that hate any longer. Everything's just like an illusion is direct confirmation of this. Considering, you know, his memories were altered. Gerald is out here with his next level gaslighting. Later in the song, incredibly muffled, we hear, I know you're supporting me. Yes, Shadow, Maria is supporting your decision to protect humanity. All the weight of everything he's been through is present in this song, and it's beautiful. Whomever created Shadow's backstory had some serious passion to deliver a great narrative, and they succeeded. Some of that information I quoted isn't directly stated in-game, but some of the subtext is there if you know about it beforehand. The fight with the Bio-Lizard has plenty more impact on Shadow's character. They were both creations of Gerald Robotnik, so in some sense, they are siblings and share a history with no other. There's a connection there, and the melancholy song fits this depressing fight. Do you see this thing? Its eyes are tubes, and with the way it swivels slowly around the arena to grab Shadow, it's hard not to think that the Bio-Lizard struggles to even move. It looks like it's on life support, and it actually is. The red glowing bit on its bat is its life support machine thingy. Its existence has to be torture. If Shadow falls in this fight, although I'm not sure he does this anywhere else, he will call out Maria's name. The early part of this fight is spent sprinting from the slow-moving Bio-Lizard and dodging these balls that are harder to dodge than they appear. They come out at just the right rhythm to be tight to time dodging for. I think you can homing attack left and right to avoid them, as you can see me doing here, but I promise it's not easy. With some practice, I could get it down, but for my first time fighting it in years, I feel I did pretty well. These pink balls you need to homing attack up are finicky, and if you haven't familiarized yourself with the particulars of the homing attack system in SA2, it's likely they will cause frustration aplenty. Since they appear in the latter part of the fight, failing there makes you redo all of it, and that's never fun. To homing attack properly, you have to wait until you're decently up in the air and then try to point your stick to the one you want to homing attack towards. Take your time, be patient, and you'll eventually hit the life support enough to push the Bio-Lizard into their last phase. Float between the pink balls carefully to hit it one more time, and the Bio-Lizard is down.
Get out, you ugly prototype!
Damn, all I said about you two being like siblings, and That's what you have to say? He didn't need to destroy the bio-lizard like that. Overall, it's a decently challenging fight that doesn't mess around, and moving against the camera for most of it really tests your ability to move around in a 3D space. If you've been playing games for a long time like I have, you take for granted the ability to do so. I've personally been gaming for over 2 decades, so moving in games has become second nature to me. It's hard to recall what it was like struggling to move, but I did at one point, and I'm of the opinion SA2 builds up your abilities gradually without babying you. It does an amazing job. I wouldn't recommend it as a game to start with. That title goes to Mario's games, but Sonic would be a more advanced game I'd suggest after some experience with platformers. That must have been more stairs than I thought if Sonic and Knuckles are only getting up them now. I love how Knuckles directly quotes Tikal here.
The servers are the 7 chaos. Chaos is power. Power is enriched by the heart. The controller is the one that unifies the chaos. Only you can do this. Stop the Chaos Emeralds!
This is a reference to itself that feels earned and then some. Even if Knuckles' cohesion with the other characters' plots left things to be desired, this here almost makes up for it. The Bio-Lizard gets chaos controlled away, and we learn that it is directly guiding the Ark down to the Earth despite the Chaos Emeralds being neutralized. I think we all know what this is building up to.
Since we've stopped the Chaos Emeralds, why is the space colony still on a crash course to Earth? Sonic?
The game may look rough by today's standards, but 20 years ago, this was the shit. This is our supersonic fight of the game. We're out in space with Super Shadow, and we need to finish the Bio-Lizard before the Ark crashes into the Earth. The Bio-Lizard will shoot lasers and its pink balls at us to prevent us from approaching these huge boils on it. Between hits, we switch between the hedgehogs, also giving a ring top-up. The other characters watching will repeatedly call out to you, urging you to hurry.
Can both of you hear me? Atmosphere entering in about 4 minutes. Hurry!
This, paired with your dwindling ring count, amps up the tension to 11. The black of outer space around, the Ark behind the Bio-Lizard, and the Earth below paired with Live and Learn blasting makes this an epic moment, feeling like a real proper climax. When writing the script for this, the nostalgia tingle activated, and I could feel the chills flush through my body. It was so intense, my nipples could straight up cut glass. Live and Learn makes this fight so special. Without it, the fight itself isn't all that interesting gameplay-wise, and all the tension is missing. It goes to show how much each little thing can bring a scene together. The build-up, spectacle, and music were all pivotal in making this scene as strong as it is. I want to let the game speak for itself one last time now. Let's listen.
I must destroy all the evil the Professor has created.
No way that's getting through!
chance to be happy.
Now, Shadow! Chaos control!
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
I doubt anyone expected what happened to Shadow at the end. Everyone's melancholic final talk with one another feels so raw and real. Rouge questions Shadow's purpose of his existence, but Sonic reassures her that Shadow is his own man.
Do you really think that the professor created him, Shadow, to carry out the revenge on all those who live here on Earth?
He was what he was. A brave and heroic hedgehog who gave his life to save this planet. Shadow the Hedgehog.
Eggman talks about stuff that flies way over an 8-year-old's head, and expectedly, Tails responds like how any 8-year-old would.
To my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
I don't know, but what I do know is we all did it together.
Knuckles checks in on Rouge, but he completely misses the hints she drops once again.
So what's next for you, Rouge? Off again to find those jewels you love so much?
Nah, I think I'm gonna give up this line of work. Too much work for too little pay. Anyway, I've got something better than jewels that I'm thinking about right now. It'll all work out, you'll see.
If you say so.
Sonic, contemplating Shadow's existence and who he was, puts on a front for Amy, who sees how gloomy he is.
Oh, it's nothing. Come on, let's go home. To the planet as cool and blue as me.
Finally, he softly bids farewell to the hero, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
It's all excellent. I've said before, I wish I could see some of the characters standing around and talking without any life-threatening motivations or danger. And this is exactly that. It's perfectly placed at the tail end of the game, giving us an opportunity to reflect on the game we've been through and the characters we've been on this journey alongside. They're all vulnerable here, and we get to experience this rare side to them that we could really use more of. The game ends on "Rest easy, heroes," followed by a picture of Shadow protecting the Earth that someone dear to him loved. Maybe he too came to love the planet and its people. Imagine you played this game back when it released. This brand new character is gone, and I'd be willing to bet tons of people were sad to see Shadow go. I mean, the fan outcry was enough that they brought him back in Sonic Heroes, but in this moment, his fate was all but confirmed. Plummeting down to Earth isn't something most people come back from, after all. Nowadays, we know to doubt every death that happens off screen due to writers pulling one too many fake-outs all across media. But back then, this felt final. Indeed it was, because Sega didn't know if they were going to be able to continue making games after this. The Dreamcast undersold, and Sega was in financial troubles to say the least. This easily could have been the last Sonic game, which would have been Sonic's end as well as Shadow's. It's a very bittersweet ending if you were aware of this fact. You can tell the developers put as much as they could into this game, and that effort has people still showing love till this very day. I'm just one of many saying I love Sonic Adventure 2, strengths, shortcomings, and all. If you come from the Sonic 3 movie and want to see Shadow's origin in the games, I hope this playthrough shows you his strong introduction to the series well. Of course, watching someone else play will never give you the same understanding as playing the game for yourself. So if you find yourself curious at all, take the plunge. Sonic Adventure 2 is cheap to buy, and modding it is easier than ever with the help of BlazeHedgehog's guide. If you worry the game might be too obtuse and old for you to enjoy, or you've seen too much you dislike from a glance, then I'm genuinely surprised you're still here. Thanks for sticking along for the ride. To sum up, the hero story is more reactive than proactive. The dark story has an issue with its midpoint not being all too interesting and fillery, and the final story's gameplay could have used more time in the oven to truly become great. On that same note though, the hero story has fun, iconic levels with well thought out gameplay for most of its runtime. The dark story gives intriguing insight onto the going-ons of the plot we didn't get to see as the heroes, and the last story pays homage to its predecessor while cementing Rouge and Shadow as characters we love to this very day. Sonic Adventure 2 does a lot right, a lot wrong, and a lot just okay. I think all the gameplay styles present could come back and be reiterated on to great success. Nothing here is so bad that it needed to be entirely thrown away. With Sonic Frontiers allowing us to play as Tails, Knuckles, and Amy again, maybe we'll finally have the return of Sonic-friend gameplay styles in Sonic games. I do understand it's difficult to get people to want to play one way, much less 3 different ways in one game. But with Sonic's friends being pushed so far into the background, it's made their world feel less alive and lived in, if that makes sense. I would love to see more continuity from the series, and in more ways than simply talking about past events. It was so cool to see elements from Sonic Adventure 1 appearing, like the mention of Station Square, the artificial chaos that the government created, and even Knuckles quoting what he learned from Tikal in Adventure 1. I could easily be convinced that Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 took place in the same universe. It'd be much harder to convince me that the Boost formula games fit into a timeline together. Sonic doesn't have to have a consistent continuity or momentum, but if they really want to make those hard-hitting stories like they did with Shadow here, they need characters to do it with, and momentum. I love Sonic's friends, and they deserve their time in the spotlight too. More important than anything else I've said, I want to say, I love Sonic Adventure 2. Thank you, Sega. Oh boy. This video is definitely longer than the Sonic Adventure one. It's over 3 hours at minimum. That much I can tell by just looking at the length of the script. With well over 100 hours of work put into this, if you've made it this far, will you let me know how you feel about the video using the like and dislike buttons? I need feedback to keep on improving, and engagement. Also, if you want to see more, I'd love it if you subscribed. As for what's next, I'd guess either Sonic 06 or Sonic Heroes. Leaning towards the latter. Both games are ones I'd have to emulate to record, so I'm not necessarily set on the idea, but we'll see. I've already yapped for long enough though, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day. WeebBear, out.